And I would like to
Recording in progress.
call back to order the recessed city budget committee meeting for May 30th, 2024. And before we do that, I agree with Mr. Paulison last week that said we should start with the Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer. So I would like us to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And then Lee, if you would do a prayer.
Okay.
All right, let's begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather tonight. Father, you tell us if any man or woman lacks wisdom, you give it to them. So God, Father, we humbly come before you tonight and ask for wisdom. And Father, our heart goes out to the family of this man that lost his life today here in town. We pray that you give peace and comfort for his family, and we just thank you for doing that, God. Pray these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. All right, and roll call. I am Kim Wiggin, Budget Committee member.
Brian Hodson, Mayor.
Jack Pendleton, committee member.
Lee Wiggin, committee member.
Jim Davis, City Councilor.
David Tate, committee member.
Katie Joyner, financial analyst.
Scott Schlag, finance director.
Eileen Stein, City Administrator.
Tracy Hensley, City Council President.
Teresa Richley, Deputy City Recorder. Maya Benham, Administrative Director, City Recorder. Good evening, Jamie Stickle, Director of Economic Development and Communication Specialist.
Jerry Nelson, Public Works Director.
Kevin Aguilar, HR Director.
George Stroh, Chief of Police. John Murray, Finance.
And on the screen,
Scott Sassy, City Councilor.
Jason Patton, City Councilor.
Darrell Paulson, committee member.
And Marissa Ely, Library Director.
all right. Now, do we have anyone in the audience or in Zoom that would like to address the city budget committee? No? All right, then let's move to the parking lot issues.
So, Budget Committee, you have been through the process of reviewing the general fund and the various other funds of the city. So all we have to present tonight is the parking lot list, and I was just going to go through that item by item and let you discuss that. I will discuss our responses to it as well, and then we will be ready to consider adoption of the budget. So does everybody have the parking lot list before them? Okay. So just going to the first item, grant writer, Councilor Patton recommended that the council conduct a study to see if bringing in a grant writer would be economically feasible. I would recommend studying this in fiscal year 24-25 and proposing for 25-26 if such a position is necessary. I just want to see staff's capacity to do this work themselves as part of their workloads rather than having a full-time grant person. So that's how I would propose not including anything in this year's budget for a grant writer. Is there any questions?
Comment?
Comments?
Yes, Councilor Davis.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Patton that this is an important position, not necessarily that we need to have an employee established as grant writer, but there are companies that we can look at hiring to do grants. We're missing out on a lot of revenue potentially. revenue that we could be doing other projects such as the painting of the bridge or beautification of the bridge, things like that. There's state grants and everything else, and I think we're missing out on a lot of opportunity for various grants. And so as an option, I would make a recommendation that we look at a company that does grant writing for us rather than a full-time position.
I would agree that would be part of the study. I mean, you said you want to see if staff could handle it, but
Right.
I would like to see Councilor Davis's thoughts taken into consideration as well.
Absolutely, and I think we can, we can look at, so the response that I had didn't preclude that option. It's just that I didn't want to bring any other staff on board prematurely. But I think,
I totally agree. And
Yeah.
I'm in agreement that we shouldn't hire a grant writer, but we've discussed this at the council goal setting session. Councilor Patton has brought it up numerous times. And we're losing money by not obtaining some of these grants. So I think that we not lose this and that we do this in this next budget fiscal year.
This is Councilor Maddow. You have a moment? Are we ready?
Yes.
I agree with what's been said so far. I think, including whether this is, weighing the options between in-house or contract would be wise, similar to other things that we've done. And I just want to preface this by saying that there are folks in the city that staff that have put effort into grant writing, and we have gotten grants for that, so I don't want to diminish their effort for that, but I agree with Councilor Davis that I think there's more out there to be had. And so, yeah, I'm all for moving forward as recommended here.
Yes, Mayor Hudson?
So, again, not just necessarily disagreeing, do we have any idea of what a contracted grant writer would cost? And if we are looking to try to pull that trigger this year, do we need to set aside the funds in this budget to make sure that we have that for, at some point, for us to work on contracting that help?
Dawn, would you mind stepping down? And the reason I'm asking Dawn to step down is that we met with a grant writing company 2 or 3 months ago who proposed something, and I just can't remember, Dawn, if there was, did they have a dollar amount associated with their?
Let me try to answer the question, which is slightly different than someone that would be on an as-needed basis. There was Jacobs Engineering. Eileen and I were brainstorming on things like big lift ticket items the city has. Road and infrastructure projects, Cub's need for a water treatment plant for the horizon of the growth in the city, which is about 10 years from their presentation. And Jacobs actually had approached Cub as well, because Cub was going out for an RFP to have a representative and also a contracted person to do their design work for their facility. I happen to know some folks at Jacobs because I had worked with them previously in a previous job, and so that was a natural connection point. And so Eileen and I did have some conversation with Jacobs, and what they were planning to do was do a platform of things that the city might have needs for, as well as what Cub would have needs for. It's not an inexpensive proposition situation. The initial evaluation would be, there's several steps to the process, and it depends on what you're going after. The big money is the federal money that is really where that's at, where you get millions of dollars in grants. Kind of the long and the short of it, it was they were going to do an initial kind of screening for like 5,000 is my recollection. Then they were going to do a process of application submittal for 50,000, which is a pre-application process. That would then end up indicating whether or not you were likely going to be eligible for that, and this is on the federal level. And then I think there was about another 30,000 or so for 30 to 50,000 to complete the application process. Obviously, larger targeted projects are more specifically important. I think in the grant writing, I think identifying what would be really the highest priorities for the city would be step one. And that would, what we would get out of the Jacobs situation, and we didn't go any further with that because it really, at the point, seemed like it was more about Cub than it was anything else, and they had obviously received the information. I think going forward, though, I would recommend that we make a list of items that we would want funding for. I mean, we could use somebody like Jacobs, and Jacobs actually has people back in DC. They are probably the second largest engineering company in the United States. So they have people that are in influential places, and they have been very successful in other jurisdictions, Gresham, Medford, and several other places where they can show that they leveraged $100,000 worth of grant writing for, $10 million, or I'm not sure, I can't give you an exact amount, but large sums of money. So the return on investment is quite large. The challenge is, trying to define what the target is, and maybe there is some synergies between us and Cubs still, because I think that even with their rate increases and everything else they're doing, it feels like that hasn't been solved, and running out of water or possibly not having enough water after 10 years, and we're planning for growth for 20 right now, is not a good prospect. So I think those are some things that would be in play here, would be some collaboration with Cub on that situation, and maybe partnering with them on maybe splitting the cost of, in terms of that. But I think having a starting point would be having a list of projects that we'd want them to go after, would be my suggestion.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps. I know that was a lot, but I didn't expect to speak on this tonight.
Councilor Patton, did you have a question? Councilor Patton, did you have a question? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, with as infant as this kind of discussion is, I don't know if it's necessary to try and carve out money, considering we don't even really have any clue. I can see where the mayor is coming from, but, I think if 5 months from now, 5 or 6 months from now, it's decided that we need to pull the trigger on something, this might be a good test of having the mid-year budget review and making those adjustments and stuff in that process, including the entire budget committee. So, I don't know about carving money out in this budget right now, but I have a feeling that there'll be, like, if we need to do something, we will have the opportunity to do that. And now I'm going to try and lower my hand. I'm not sure if it's coming. Oh, look at that, totally did.
He's scaring me.
Oh,
And
yes,
he's driving.
sorry. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Don, thank you. Thank you for the explanation, but I do stay where I'm at in regards to, we need to look at the potential for grants. I have no problems having a work session with staff and department heads and talking about opportunities for grants, but I think we need to earmark some money for grants because of the return of investment. So I'm staying with my original recommendation.
Do you have an amount that you would propose?
I think you can handle that. I think as a city administrator, you can maybe check with other cities or municipalities.
Okay.
Gresham as an example of what they budgeted and stuff. That's not my job.
Well, I'm just going to jump in here. I think if we plan on adopting the budget tonight, we as a group have to figure out how much money that's going to be and where it's going to come from. Like, we are past the time of saying, figure out how much it might cost and let's add it into the budget. I mean, I think if the mayor and you, Councilor Davis, want to add it in, we have to amend the budget tonight to do that. Am I off base by any?
No, you're correct. If there is going to be an amount of money that is set aside, it needs to come from essentially the general fund reserve, unless you choose to move other money around in order to free up resources to pay for it. But we do need to know an amount of money.
Yes, Mayor Hodson.
Yeah, just to be clear, I do think that we are to the point where grant writing, either a hired contractor or somebody on staff that we've got to do that is an important piece. I don't think we're ready to scratch checks to do that yet. I think we need to figure out what are those grants, what are those dollar amounts that we need to put towards that process, because, just on what, napkin sketch there, to go after federal grants, we're talking $100,000 to $125,000, and if we're going to earmark that money to do that this year, that's got to come from somewhere else. So that leads to the next question of if we want to do that whole amount, where does it come from?
And I would say, I would agree with the mayor on that. We need to move this to a work session and look at opportunities, because I know there's other grants. We've received other grants. I've written other grants, and there's companies out there that will take a percentage based upon what they receive too. It's not the big company that you were going with. There's state grants, there's all kinds of grants to be.
Yeah, and I was just going to add in, and not to, be advocating, just saying
Right.
neutral here, but Jacobs was going to be looking at basically state and federal grants, all of them. And again, I think they're more targeted on earmark because obviously they're interested in doing the work. So this is kind of their leverage for that point, but they're not charging an exorbitant amount for the return on what they're getting. But back to your point, Councilor Davis, I think that they have other grant folks as well. I think my only other thought on this is if there's not a decision made tonight, I do agree that it would be helpful, I think, to have some set-asides for this. This person, if we were to have something that came up the city really wanted to target, it'd be valuable to do that, and maybe there'd be a midpoint budget adjustment for perhaps if we do nothing else tonight. That would be my only recommendation.
Counselor Sassy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I think we're forgetting, we have a lady in town, Carol Palmer, who's written a lot of grants for Heritage Landmark and other stuff. She would be a good one to invite to the work session. She could let us know the costs. I know she's went state, I don't know about federally, but I know she's got a lot of state grants. The last one was in Heritage Landmark, that was $30,000, I believe. So there's another tool right in town that we could go to.
And I think part of it is, I would, again, like the planning side of things, I won't just focus on what we're doing. Those are fairly easy and tangible for us to take those on. But the ones that have competition with them, which are the higher dollar amounts, and Carol, I do agree with Councilor Sassy, we need somebody that's done this and is familiar, because we're dealing with a very competitive environment for that.
Any other questions?
Actually, my question turned into more of a comment. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. What I think I understand from hearing all of this is we're good, I'm looking at Jim, with approving the budget without it in here, but doing a work session and a study, and then perhaps a mid-year supplemental budget. Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay. Great, thank you. Yes. The next item on the emergency plan, so the response is, while I don't disagree with this need, I wanted to get through the planning process for the emergency operations plan and figure out what resources are needed. So the chief gave me a cost estimate for an emergency management coordinator that would be likely over $200,000 once benefits were calculated into this base wage. And there was some discussion about whether the fire district would be willing to share this cost. So what do you want to do with an emergency management
Councilor Davis.
coordinator.
Thank you, and I disagree with the response in regards to an emergency manager position. I looked up current through Indeed what emergency manager positions go for, and if this includes roll-ups, then possibly maybe 150,000 to 175,000 with roll-ups.
Okay.
About 80-some thousand dollars for salary for an emergency manager. But I think more importantly is just the fact that we sat through with the consultant the other day reviewing the emergency management plan, and she is recommending that either her company or somebody else continue to do education of department heads and staffing for the Emergency Operations Center, because it's going to do no good to have a plan without somebody to help facilitate and do the training for the City of Canby's division, or for the department heads and for the employees, so that they know what their roles and responsibilities are. Because today we do not have, if we had a disaster, the city is not ready. And I want to make that perfectly clear. The city is not ready for a disaster. Secondarily, the amount of work that the fire district has already provided to the city is over and above what our authority is. And so we are a good partner and provided service to already at our cost for the City of Canby for emergency management. And we've shown that time and time again through the various disasters that have happened. Okay, so we can have an emergency management plan, but it's going to sit on the shelf and collect dust without somebody to help coordinate it.
Yeah, part of that would be obviously training on that. But one of the things that I would like to see is this consultant come back and recommend, what does a city our size need for an emergency manager? Is it a 25% position? Is it a full-time position? And where they recommend that should come from. I know a lot of other cities our size, emergency management has been a part-time position through another. So like I know Public Works through Oregon City, and I know in Lake Oswego through the administration department. So I think that it would be nice for someone to say, okay, you're a city your size, this is what you need, and instead of a full-time person, because that's pretty expensive. And that 200,000 is a rough estimate with all roll-up costs. So.
Yes, Councilor Stearns.
I don't know this. First, sorry for being late. I got caught up in traffic coming back from Portland. But for an emergency manager position, and this may be just my small perspective on it, I remember a long time ago in a land far away, I was somewhat involved in a rural fire department, and it seemed at the time we drilled a lot for that, and it was a fire department thing more than a sheriff department, maybe because of the area I was at. There was no sheriff department. I mean, there was one, but we'd be waiting an hour for the response. So I'm wondering if such a emergency management position, in my mind, and maybe just my miseducation on this, would be more properly in the fire department, because that's something they kind of drill a lot more with. Now, obviously, funding could come from the city to support such a position, but I'm just wondering, maybe Chief Davis might have comments on where appropriately the coordination for emergency management should come from. Should it be the municipality or for the emergency? I don't know if he's got preference or idea based on his experience or not.
Sure, just, if I may, just a real quick history on it. The emergency manager used to be in the fire department, and the city took back that responsibility and authority and put it into the police department. Because when you go into a disaster, the mayor or the city council has to do a disaster declaration, and it has to come from the city council. And at that point, so the fire department was more or less managing it rather than to have the authority for it. But right now, it lands at the police department for doing emergency management. And, so whether it's through this company that can do some training for staff, that would be a good start, by having this company do training for the city employees and for the staff on what their roles and responsibilities are. But I think we should earmark some funds because it's going to be outside the contract that we currently have with that company.
And just to add a little bit more, we're in a unique situation because, right, we have the city and the fire district, right? The fire department's not part of the city, and so that's why it's a little bit unique that way wise.
Yeah, I understand that. But like I say, any kind of disaster will probably be regional in nature instead of just specific to the boundaries of the city. I mean, there may be some things that could happen, like a train thing or something that would be just in the city itself, but a lot of the particular things you'd be trained for would probably affect regional areas outside the boundaries. And I know that the fire district sort of surrounds and includes the city, so I don't know.
Yeah, and we're kind of in that growing pain size, right? Where I don't think we're big enough to have a full-time emergency management, but we need some. The police department doesn't have the staff to do it right, to do it correctly. So that's why I think a consultant or somebody that comes in and provides the training, I think that'll be beneficial for a city our size. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Councilor Hensley.
Thank you. So, Councilor Davis, are you proposing that we put money in this budget or a mid-year review like we're going to think about for the grant writer? Because it sounds like some work
I would
needs to be done.
recommend that we put some money to continue, perhaps, check with our consulting firm and see what they would charge us to do the adequate training for the department heads and for the city council. But I can't imagine it's going to be any more than, $50,000 to do that, which is much less money than doing an emergency manager.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, and I could definitely reach out to them, say, kind of get a ballpark.
But we're trying to pass this budget tonight, so you're proposing we add 50K to this budget? Or
If I had to throw something up on the wall, we've got to have some money there to continue because the company's doing a great job with the rewrite of the plan.
I guess I'd love to hear from other budget committee members on this as well.
I guess the question is, Councilor Davis, are you making a motion to move $50,000 from a particular line or from the general fund to fund this? Because I think that's essentially how this will need to happen.
If a form of a motion, that would be fine, but I'm going to leave it up to the finance director and the city administrator to determine where the money's coming from. So I'll make a motion to allocate $50,000 for future training for department heads and city council through a consulting firm.
So I'm just curious, from the city and the finance director.
Is there a second?
Sorry, before we get, the motion's been made, we gotta.
I'll second it.
Okay.
To wait it, I might want to change it, but yeah.
Okay, so now go ahead and.
Okay, sorry about being out of order. So obviously being in accounting, you have to take it from somebody to give it to somewhere. So at this point, if we're playing with the budget, do we take it currently out of reserves, or is there another line item that right now we're playing with reserves, I would assume, unless there's another, because it's going somewhere, but it's got to come from somewhere, so.
That's exactly the question. Do you want it to take it out of some other place? Or is it just coming out of reserves?
Yes, Councilor Hensley.
Well, this is kind of premature. I was going to bring this up later, but I've heard the word reserve several times now. Where are our reserves, and are we at the 20 to 25% that the council has been wanting? I mean, what does it look like if we take it from reserves? I know reserves wasn't on the parking lot, but I was going to bring it up after we got through the list. But now I'm just going to bring it up because that word keeps coming up.
Page 39 is going to kind of assist with where we're at. down the table at the bottom on page 39.
Okay, right, so we're at 20,
So proposed is 23.
23 was the proposal, yeah, I have that note from before. So what would this, how much are we gonna wanna take out of reserves? We're talking about this 50K, perhaps later at grant writer. I'm worried that we're going to perhaps end up less than our goal for reserves. So I guess I'm looking to this finance director and city administrator for an answer to that.
When you have one, I'd like to make a recommendation.
So first, I think you gotta land the plane on how much you want. If you want 50, I can add 50 to any line item and do a quick calc and give you an idea. But I think that's what I need first is what's the ideal amount that you want to throw into a line item? 50,000, 75, 100K?
The motion was 50,000.
Okay.
Yes, suppose we can discuss what it does to users and grant writer at that mid-review. Fair point, thank you.
So if I may, what might be good to do is to kind of split this up and go through, like, set this, if like, table this motion or something just for the moment and get through the parking lot items, and then come back and, but there's also some stuff that Darrow has asked to be brought up as kind of like an extension of the parking lot. And then once we kind of get through the parking lot, then we can go through the process of making the amendment, any amendments to the budget, and then kind of go on from there, if that makes sense.
Actually, Jason, yeah, right now, we don't have Zoom in front of us, but Maya just sent me a screenshot of Darrow's question. So Madam Chair, may I read Darrow's question?
Yes.
In the event of a citywide emergency, who is our current coordinator? Who will this responsibility fall on? What is the chain of command via FEMA regulations? That's what Mr. Paulson is asking in the chat.
Yeah, in the end, it would fall under me.
Ending fund balance.
It would be Chief Cho. Did you hear that, Mr. Paulson? You're muted.
So,
Yeah, I heard it, sorry, my voice is gone.
Hence the chat. I gotcha.
He had a thumbs up.
so just as a rule of order, and so someone correct me if I'm wrong, if we decide to go with Counselor Patton's idea of just like, okay, so, great. So the idea of parking lot item of going with an emergency plan coordinator to do some training for earmark 50, we can just start tabulating some of this stuff and then decide at the end where we're going, like where that would come from, right? Because we've got 80,000 that was in there from, which is later in the list here for Canby Kids, which we're not totally sure where that may have come from, but what to do with that money. So my suggestion would be then to withdraw the motion and then come back later after we've gone through all this and have dollar amounts that we want to add back in. Is that,
I'm good with that. I'll withdraw my motion.
okay, you're okay with withdrawing? Okay. So I've got written down here 50K for that. Thank you.
Yeah. Next item, are we ready to move on? Next item was the cost of, Counselor Patton brought up the fact that it takes police department 40% of the general fund, or that the PD takes up 40% of the general fund. He asked if PD adds staff, how do we keep them funded? Counselor Stearns also brought up what it costs to add 3 additional police officers. So the cost of adding 1 patrol officer is approximately $180,000. And the cost of 3 officers would be between $540,000 and $600,000. So other cities that have wanted to remove the burden, if you will, of paying for public safety from their general funds have used a separate operating levy. Such levies require voter approval and are limited in duration, anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And it must be renewed by the voters. Other cities have chosen to impose a fully is utility fee that would work much like other utility fees. They're added to the utility bill, and these fees generally range from $2 to $5 per household per month. So those are a couple of options for funding the police department, and the cost of one officer would be about $180, and that's roll up too, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, thoughts about that?
Yes, Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder though, a levy kind of worries me because we have a fire levy, we have a pool levy. The folks of this town seem to support those, and they would probably support the police, but I worry, where are we with compression? Exactly. So I want an answer to my question first, unless you have it. Do you know where we are with compression, Councilor Patton?
Well, there was some discussion about where we're at with compression on various things. Greg Parker had contacted Cub about this, and there was some discussion back and forth between Canby Utility Board and them about if there was going to be a
Where are we?
levy for the water treatment plant and stuff, and how the different levies fall in and what attribute to compression and which ones don't.
I think public safety, would, Councilor Davis, would a public safety levy affect fire and, like the pool does?
We are in compression as we speak.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was actually raising my hand because I wanted to get on the list to not cut you off, but talk about some other stuff regarding this, so.
Okay. So yeah, that worries me, just in general. Compression is a scary thing, so.
Understandably, it is. I wasn't thinking about the compression issue, but I wanted to at least get the cost of an officer costed out so you knew what you were dealing with if you made a suggestion. Right now, without going to a levy or a police utility fee or some other means, then we're right back where we were with the other two issues, that adding any officers to the budget is a general fund. We're taking it out of the reserve as well, so.
Yes, Councilor Patton.
So I think this talks to something that I've brought up several times, and I think is in the process of being fleshed out, but I think this might speed this whole thing up. I've talked about the city getting together with all the other taxing districts that are in the city and figuring out how we're going to Gantt chart out all of these levies. I mean, any sort of levies. So the school board is going to want to do, the school is going to need more money. Fire is going to need more money eventually. The city needs more money. The fact of the matter is that we are not generating enough tax to provide all of the services that the citizens feel they should be getting with their tax dollars. And that is across the board for any state. Only by sitting down with all of these districts and figuring out who needs what when and a rough idea of how much are we really going to get a handle on A, compression, B, not hitting the taxpayer all in one big shot, and trying to master plan this out. Because we can sit here and talk about what we want to do, but all of a sudden we put out because we've got now the Canby Parks have changed their line, right? So I'm sure there's talk of maybe going out for a levy for them. Well, what if we put that levy on the same year that the school puts out a levy to build another building, right? We will be tripping over ourselves. So I really think, and part of my reasoning for bringing up this, throwing out the idea, I'm sorry, I'm a little winded because I ran in here, bringing this up is because I really think that this is very important. I know you have a lot of stuff on your plate, and we can work on prioritizing it, but until we sit down with all of the stakeholders that are part of this process, we're never really going to be able to get a good answer of that question.
These are all issues that are very real, which is why George was very gracious about not asking for other officers this year. So, I just want to remind the Budget Committee that this count came from the Budget Committee. This was not staff advocating for any additional officers. So just this information is presented in that light.
Okay. Duly noted.
Thank you. I do want to say, Counselor Patton, that Eileen and I have had that conversation on what would that look like and bringing everyone together and when we would be looking at doing that. Now with the school district going through a superintendent search here, doesn't mean that we can't have that conversation with someone, either the assistant superintendent or their finance director there at the school district to be able to have that conversation. But yes, so Eileen and I have had that conversation already.
Yeah, and I guess I would say to that too, like, the thought of holding off on it because now the school district is, I would just say to that, well then, when Chief Davis has his Chief Davis hat on, he's retiring, so now we have a new person there.
No, I understand that. That's why I'm saying it would be, we would, more than likely, it would probably include people from their finance teams that
Yes.
we know that know what's going on with that conversation. So that we could have that versus waiting on those kinds of things.
Well, we have the superintendent for about another month, so maybe we can have the conversation, a quick conversation sooner.
Yeah, or identify the person below that city, below the superintendent level that can be included in that as like that more stable person through that conversation.
The finance director, like the mayor said, I think, yeah.
So what sorry.
Yes, Mayor Hudson.
Nope,
Well, I'm wondering the same thing.
Mayor
What
doesn't
do you-
have a vote in the city budget, and so.
What do you want to do
Try
with
not
this item?
Yes.
I
Commissioner
would
Davis.
agree with Counselor Patton that we just pull together. I think it'd be a worthwhile to just make an earmark to have a work session and pull together the various districts. I think that's a good idea, and to talk about it, so that once we figure that out and where we're at, invite the county somebody from the county assessor's office to actually talk about compression and where the impacts of a levy would have on compression and things like that. I think is a really good idea.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is more informational rather than
Right.
this, to me, doesn't seem like an action item for this budget. Am I hearing you all
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Stearns.
Well, I just wanted to bring it up because I think I meant, Chief Tro, you mentioned that we were like short, maybe 3 officers than what we would like to do. I know, obviously, we can't have everything we want, that's what we learn in life. But I do think it's something that we should discuss, because one thing that bothers me a little bit is that you mentioned that you would like to have officers be supervised the whole time. And I think that at least that some thought should be put into, I mean, it is what it is, and nothing's bad happened yet, but I'm still uncomfortable with unsupervised police officers going around. I have, in the past, known lots of police officers, and most of them are really good. Some of them I've known were not good. I've even known some police officers that got their license, or whatever, their certificate revoked and things like that. So I think that something we should strive to do as a city, one of the prime functions of the city is public safety. And I like the idea of having supervised police officers. But when you say there was not, how many, to get, there's 2 goals. One is to get 3 per shift, right? The other one is have supervisors for all shifts. Are those, would it take 3 officers to do both of those, or are we?
3 officers to do both of those, yeah. 2 of them would be officers, 1 would be a supervisor.
Okay.
So 3 sworn.
But if you got
positions.
one, you could just do the supervisor thing, or would it be, or you would?
Could, I mean, we'd have to fill a shift because supervisor is a different role.
Okay.
But we would, if I got 1, I would put them more on as an officer, and then that next one is a sergeant, the next one is a supervisor, as an officer, something like that.
Okay, okay. No, I just thought that it was important that we talk about that, because obviously a budget, we are making decisions, and one of the decisions we're making is to have 3 less than the chief was comfortable with, and maybe there's no, but I think there should be a discussion on that, at least. And as far as where that money would come from, I just asked for you, if we gave you 1 instead of 3, is that just not good, or is it 3 or nothing?
No, it helps our goal of having minimum of 3.
I'm just thinking, is it all or
Right,
nothing thing?
2 years ago, you guys approved a supervisor, so we have an additional night shift supervisor, which helps us get to that 24/7 supervision. We would need another one to get there. And then for a 3 officer minimum, that's where around the clock, we would need 3 total. But yes, 1 would help us get there, for sure.
Because it's not all, I'm just want to say it's all or nothing, 1, 2, or 3, but I think, okay. That's kind of what I want to do, but the budget committee, like I say, would have to take the money from reserves, and I think that reserve discussion should say, do we have any money in reserves, or what's our goal for reserves? And can we go, let's say have 23%, 22, or 21, I figure, just by my rough math, is about $150,000 per percent in reserves, if I didn't do the math, if I did the math right, is that math right? Okay, about 150. So basically, if you went from 23 to 22, it's 150.
Exactly.
22 to 21, 150. So I just kind of want to throw that out. But I don't know if the rest of the committee wants to put that as an action item, or do they want to just sit around, or if we want to say that we're good with what we have?
Councilman Patton?
This is no offense to the police department. I think we need to, I am not for adding another officer into this budget right now. We added an officer as a school resource officer with a surplus of funds that they had a few months ago. We want to try and come up with a plan to have the gentleman who is the crisis management, what is? Behavioral health specialist, sorry for butchering that. Okay. Figure out how we can keep him on staff and such, or that position on staff. And I think that there are other departments that could utilize staff. And I will just bring back to the fact that the police take up a vast majority of our budget, and all of the other departments have to fit in that little sliver. And citizens demand services from all those other departments as much or more so than police. So I personally would not be for bringing on a new officer in this budget cycle if we had a surplus or not, but looking to the future to figure out how we can try and come up with a sustainable funding way to make the police department whole, if that makes sense.
Mr. Pendleton, did you have a question? Did you have a question? Mr. Pendleton, you had your hand up. No? Okay. No. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Commissioner Davis.
I'd like to start out by saying, I appreciate the Canby Police Department and the people of the Canby Police Department. We've got one of the best departments in the Portland metro area, and so my hats go off to each and every one of them. But I do agree with Councilor Patton that right now, anyway, I think we need to sustain what we have. Having the behavioral health person on board is spot on, and making sure we can sustain the people that we have, without adding any new positions. But then again, looking at whether or not we can do a public safety like Gresham just did for more police officers and stuff like that in the future, so I agree.
Are we ready to move on? So I'm hearing not to put this on the parking lot list.
Sounds like a future work session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So related to that is Parks staffing, discussion of parks deferred maintenance and what it would take for the city to add staff to better maintain the parks. So Jerry, if you would come up, please. The cost of one full-time maintenance worker, Jerry estimated would be about $100,000 for a maintenance worker, one position. So that's the next question. Do you want to add any staff to your parks program to better maintain city parks?
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, that question, I know that there was some questions on what we were doing with the parks on staffing, and so we clarified that. And so basically that we're going to keep the current staff we have and add 2 parks seasonals. And then the 4 street seasonals will take, our parks department does a lot of the streets work and stormwater and collections work too that we fund it for. So we're hoping we could take some of them seasonals, put them towards that to help with the workload. So, and again, the Parks Advisory Committee is big on saying that it does show that the Parks Department needs 3 more employees to do what's maintaining, especially adding parks. But we want to keep the employees we have too. So that's important to us, not going through what we did in the past when we've not had the funding to do it. So I want to stay pretty conservative with this. So I don't know if this answers your question, but this is just a little bit of information where Public Works stands with the Parks Department.
Yes, Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jerry, I know that there's certain rules with like the unions and whatnot, but I'm wondering if instead of hiring an additional employee, is there a way that you can supplement with some outside services for just like hiring for certain tasks? Maybe you hire somebody that just does the mowing and then your staff can take care of other things. Is that an option?
Yeah, that's something that we want to look into and have actually talked about it. It's just like an example is the First Avenue development that we did down there that our parks people maintain. That's something that we could go out for bids and contract it out to a landscaper to take workload off parks and pay for it directly out of streets. Right now, when Jeff was running the Parks Department, by putting all them streets employees on there to do that with the parks, it made it a lot more efficient having a large group to do that. So when the workload gets too big and we fall too far behind, we're going to research them avenues. Okay. And I think we'll have to when we build Auburn Farms. Okay. You know, and if we do a potential dog park in the following budget cycle or something like that, we're going to have to look at those avenues, Councilor Enzi.
Okay, because I mean, I understand that there's employment rules with the union and whatnot, but I'm thinking if there's a way to supplement and help it out to get this deferred maintenance stuff caught up, then maybe we should be exploring that.
It's like if we're doing it and cutting employees and stuff like that, but we don't have an issue with that. The other thing that's a big one too that takes a lot of time is like light up the night and these events that we like. And so, you know, all of that stuff takes away from park stuff, but it's big and it's good for our community and stuff like that. So that is avenues we could look into in the future. And I didn't come here to ask for more employees. I mean, I would love to have more employees because we could have nicer parks, but I do appreciate what we have. I really do. So.
Just like the police chief.
Yes, Mayor Hanson.
So Jerry, as we have this conversation, would shifting or increasing the amount of seasonal helpers, seasonal workers be a better utilization of the dollars? I mean, because the intensity here seems to be, you know, late spring as the weather gets nice all the way through that September, October window. Would that be a
yes,
better use of funds to do that?
Yes, Mayor. And the problem in the past is we've never paid any money, so we couldn't get anyone. I shouldn't say anyone, I'm insulting our chief. We had good employees like the chief's kid when he was in school, and a lot of, we would end up with more like staff, people's employees like your kid, Brian, would apply, but as the wages went up at other places, other people were grabbing these young people and getting them, so we could only get very few. And so now that we've raised the rates, we had a huge turnout. I think, Kevin, how many did we hire, make offers to? Three more just recently. So we're having good qualified turnout people now. So I think it's a good valid option to start looking into that if we can get them, and having these employees that will come back year to year. And that's what, like, Chief Tro's son worked here many years, and so it wasn't a retraining, and they came during the busy seasons while we need it, and that was really nice. But then we lose them, and we got to retrain. So, no, that's we're hoping to get more candidates. To answer your question, yes, seasonal help is really helpful.
Councilor Patton?
Again, just like I said with Chief Tro, I would love to add 3-4 more officers, and I would also like to add 3 more folks to Jerry's parks. But, again, this is one of the things that we really need to take a harder look at in a larger picture. And in this case, it goes to that larger conversation that we now need to have about Cappard and what that taxing district could look like and where all that funding will come from. And again, similar to how, these immediate need, like as far as trying to fund the police, I'm hoping that by bringing this up, it will sort of spur the council when we have our council hats on, that we need to prioritize this conversation. And hopefully, if at all possible, for the next budget cycle.
I feel like the Capper conversation is a midnight conversation for another night, but yeah, I agree. And it's a work session thing, but pack a lunch.
Yeah, and Councilor Patton, you could take on some more volunteer work too.
Put another iron in the fire. I got back from where was I at? Bellingham. That's
You
right.
don't know where you were, oh dear.
Councilor Stearns, did you have?
I have a question, and just a clarification. So it was mentioned earlier that, getting a contractor to do some of the park maintenance is not something that is feasible due to union rules. But I was curious to be educated about that, because we're contracting out for IT services, we're contracting out for some things. Is it that some things can be contracted, some things can't be? If it's a question of the particular contract, could that be something come up in the future negotiations with unions, or maybe just educate me and anybody on the budget committee that is as involved as I am?
This situation, like where the parks employees are doing streets work, the streets employees in the union aren't going to grieve it because they don't do parks work. And so we're having our parks employees do it right now, but our human resources director would always have conversations with the union on this, making sure we're not taking work away from it. But a lot of these instances, it's just we don't have the manpower or can't afford the employees to do it.
Okay, but if we wanted to explore, because there's a lot of landscapers out there that I know of that probably could bid on it.
The rules, the conversation I had with the union a while ago on this, and I don't want to get into trouble, but basically, if you're going to contract something out, they want a shot at showing that they could do it for a comparable price.
Okay.
And then if they can't do that, then the city has the right to go contract that out.
Okay, so that is it.
Am I speaking out of turn there? Okay, yeah.
So it is because it sounds like as we get new parks, we're going to have to get more people, which means that no one's losing their job over the issues of the parks. But I just am wondering why since there's so many landscaping companies out there. I know I do the books and taxes for many of them myself, that could either do one park or and so I'm just wondering why that's
like a good example of that is there is stuff contracted out in our parks, like tree trimming and a whole bunch of different little stuff like that. But basically, if the council say they decided they wanted to contract out the parks department or a streets department, all that, we could always go out for RFP for a contractor to look into that, and then we would have to compare costs on that, just like we do with IT, just like we do with anything. But little stuff, little contracts here and there has never been a problem for the union. And we fully involve them in all those conversations, but did that answer your question?
It does. I just wanted to see if there was some sort of rule or something that somebody would be breaking if we contracted
We got to be responsible with taxpayers' money, and the union understands that, so they got to be comparable with it.
Jerry, didn't you also include in the budget an amount of money for, you were going to increase tree trimming or?
Yeah, we did, and I believe, I'd have to look, I don't have it open, but, and it's up, I think, $50,000 or $43,000. We increased one of the line items for contract services so that, because we don't have that bucket truck yet. So like hazard stuff where we normally would take in-house, we're gonna just get 3 bids and have that type of stuff and let the parks guys do what they do with the cleaning the bathrooms and mowing and the stuff that they do every day. So we are contracting out more of it.
Yes.
So Commissioner Stearns, procurements in Oregon, if it's over 250, which it basically would require a formal process, there has to be a feasibility study done. So that should help answer some of your question about, does there have to be something to that effect? Procurement law, ORS 279, does say when you go out for bid, there has to be a feasibility study in that procurement. So that would basically, if Jerry's contractor that he goes out for is under that, then there's no requirement for a feasibility study. But if it's over that 250K, then that bumps it up to a formal process, and that basically means a feasibility study would have to be specifically spoken to. And I would probably say David Doman would probably be the foremost expert on that, but that is my recollection of ORS 279 procurement rules. So does that help?
Yeah.
So do you have any other questions on this issue, or is there anything that the council or the budget committee would like to do regarding this? No? Okay, moving on. There was a question whether we could use the $80,000 that was slated for Canby Kids in the Park and use that towards deferred maintenance on park programs. So the $80,000 can be reallocated if that was the desire of the budget committee. I don't recall where the $80,000 came from, but it could be reprogrammed to anywhere in the general fund if there was a desire. You'll notice down below in the budget, under other adjustments proposed by staff, I did suggest that we reduce that amount of $80,000 to $8,000. But I don't recall where that $80,000 came from originally, so.
Councilor Pat?
I actually have cooked up a plan for this $80,000, and I will wait until we get to the amendment portion to unveil that crazy idea.
As will I.
Okay.
I have my own idea.
So what
Well,
would you like us to do with that item right now?
Well, I guess if we will have competing ideas, I will just lay out what my plan was. My thought was to move 10,000, because from what I understand, the impetus behind this was to provide Canby Kids more opportunity to get some funding for their projects. And so what I was going to propose was moving $10,000 of that $80,000 into the Community Small Grants Fund, and then split the remainder amount over parks, grounds maintenance, park building maintenance, and park or streetscape landscaping. So that funding would go towards those line items that would help bolster the, and it's on page 868, under materials and services, I was gonna split that amount up over those three line items of materials and services to bolster the funds to use towards trying to catch up on some deferred maintenance, was gonna be my motion.
My motion was to put the entire 80,000 into the reserves for general fund, because we haven't got back to that conversation, that's why I was waiting. Because the general fund reserves is actually not 23%, it's 13. And we're going backwards. Last year's general fund reserves was 17.85 for just the general fund outline. And that's what I've been talking about, is the general fund reserves, not the overall citywide. On page 39, down at the bottom, that's citywide. Your general fund is 26,311,750, and you've got 3,595,291 as your reserves. That's 13.66%. And we're going backwards, and that's not okay with me. So I want as much of it back into the reserves as we can get. So I think that grant money should go right back there.
My understanding is that you're asking for a reserve for operating revenues, which is what it historically has been. And so that calculation is based off of your operating revenue.
But we're gonna keep taking from the general fund until there's no reserves? Is that what we're gonna do?
Your reserve is based off of what your operating revenues are supposed to be. That's the calculation that has been historically, Canby has utilized.
Are all the funds going backwards or just the general fund? I could sit here and do the math right now, but you should know the answer.
I don't understand why you feel like it's going backwards.
Last year's budget, the general fund reserve was 17.85%. This year's proposed budget is 13.66.
But you're using reserve, and the calculation that the council or the commission has asked for is an ending fund balance percentage of operating revenue. So that calculation is based off of the operating revenue that is basically proposed at $15 million. So if I'm to change the way that you want to see what the ending fund balance should be, then I'd have to go back and basically do some more number crunching to base it off of what you're asking for as a reserve and not as an operating revenue.
Okay. I'm just worried about all of the efforts that we've been making over the last decade to get those reserves up. I just don't want to lose the momentum we've had.
Well, no, I hear what you're saying, and I think what Scott's talking about is what we've been basing it off of, is the operating revenue.
Okay.
And building that pool deeper versus just the general fund one.
Okay.
And
So are we
so-
comfortable with 23, or are we actually trying to get to 25?
Well, again, that was the discussion that when we were talking about the budget that we gave to staff was, are we, to give on the reserves, because general practice is 15 to 18%.
Correct.
And, we're, so is that us being able to use reserve fund, the reserve number, the larger one that we were talking about for, is it staff, is it projects, is it that kind of thing? And
Okay.
so for every percent we lower, it's $150,000
Right.
that we free up to, is it staff, is it projects? Because that was the argument from last year's budget and the budget before was we're sitting on, sitting on this money and it's not doing anything. I don't necessarily agree with that statement, but that was the
I remember
impetus to
that,
look
yeah.
like, how do we hydraulically balance out the safety net, which is what we've done. We've built that safety net to being able to bring it a little bit closer to kind of that standard practice, but our comfort level for the city of Canby.
Right, well, if we're gonna go with that calculation, we're still going backwards from last year, from 26 to 23. So I'm just wondering, what is the number we're gonna land on? Then maybe I can quit worrying.
No, these are good conversations. My recollection was that the council had ended up somewhere between 20 and 25%, so
Okay. So we can keep it
23%
at
was.
23. So.
Right.
um,
But
So then that 80,000, Counselor Patton had some good ideas, but there's a lot of places that 80 could go.
Well, and with all due respect to Counselor Patton, basically what he's doing is he's taking that money from one program and splitting it into other programs in the general fund. Okay. It doesn't change the reserve amount. It doesn't change the budget at all. It's just splitting it up into other components of the program.
Because there's 80,000 already in the budget, so we're not
Right, we're just moving it
spreading,
around.
You're
moving
just
it,
moving it.
We're just
Right.
putting different cups.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, you are.
moving it in different silos.
Yeah.
Right.
And is there any restriction on what silo we could put it in? Does it have to remain in the general fund, or could it go to one of these other funds that might need it? I'm just, general question, I don't have an idea, I was just asking if it's restricted to the general fund since it's coming out of the general fund.
Well, if it's going to come out of some other fund, I'm not sure which fund it would go into, because the Parks program is in the general fund.
It was just a general budgeting question, it doesn't have
Yeah.
to remain in the general fund since it's there, and he's shaking
Yes.
his head now, so thank you, Scott.
If you decide to pull the 80 out of the park, which is in general fund, and decide to put it elsewhere.
Just for
Then-
sake, just put it into cemetery, not that I want to, but I mean, we could put it
Yeah.
anywhere in our city budget. Okay, that's what I was just curious about, thank you.
Overall, it's just going to impact either an ending fund balance or a beginning fund balance as it moves forward.
Okay, it was just a curiosity question, I appreciate you indulging me.
No problem.
Or
Yes, Counselor Stearns.
making sure I'm not talking over anybody. So my understanding is we want between 20 and 25% reserve, that money that we're not going to allocate and it's going to be there, rainy day or, so, something happens in the future that we might want to spend it. And my understanding is that 18% was the standard or
Yeah, so
the recommended standard?
GFOA, the Governmental Financial Office Association,
Government Finance
or it's another
Officers
acronym, I can't
Association.
remember what that is. Their recommendation has always been at a national level for municipal governments to be right around that 15 to 18%.
Okay. And so if I do my math right, we're having basically $750,000 currently more than the upper recommendation. If I'm doing it right in my head, 750 to,
You want me to give me to do it real quick on the spreadsheet? Or?
yeah, I was trying to do it on my
No,
calculator.
I can, I got it right here, I can do it
Yeah.
for you if you'd like.
But yes, you're tying up more money than is recommended by GFOA, which
Okay.
is fine.
Well, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to make it clear what we're doing in actual numbers. So we're saying maybe $1 million is what we're holding on to and not wanting to spend more than what the recommendation is. Now,
We are here.
and as a budget committee, as a city council, what we're telling, I guess, the people of Canby is that there's $1 million that we're holding on to. I'm just throwing $1 million as a round number, but it's going to be close within the parameters of what they said, that we are not going to, $1 million of goods or services that we're not going to provide due to our desire to weather maybe the next financial storm or to that matter. Am I incorrect in what we're saying? And perhaps we want to get to 25%, so we want to actually add another $1 $300,000 to that number as of unspent or unspendable funds, or, we could always do an emergency if that were to happen. And so I'm wondering why the council wants to have that high number or lower number. I have this discussion a lot of times about clients, especially nonprofits. Sometimes there's a tendency for some nonprofits to, what I call, be a dragon sitting on a pile of gold rather than use for the benefit of the members. And of course, that's a discussion that can go very dynamic. How much is too much? How much is too little? But I wonder, if why the desire to have $1.3 million above what's needed as unspendable? And so maybe I just open that question to the other council. I'm new on the council, so I want to ask uncomfortable questions. And so that's what my goal is.
Councilor Sassy, do you have a question?
Yes, we sat here a year ago trying to get money for Canby Kids again. I have no problem with Jason's allocations, but I would like to see 10 grand left in there. We promised him that at least 10,000. There's 5 avenues under their umbrella: baseball, softball, lacrosse, basketball, and football. That's 2,000 each. That's the least we can do.
Councilor Patton, you had a comment, question?
Well, I guess I now have two. I don't remember promising Canby Kids that we were going to fund them directly, and if memory serves me correctly, the last time.
Archer, right?
I'm sorry, what?
When I sat on the committee last year on the budget, I talked to Scott Archer, we discussed it in budget, and he was going to work on putting money in the program.
I guess my concern is that back when we were funding Canby Kids and a bunch of other different organizations when the budget was in crisis, we stripped all those out. And we did, and then when the opportunity came back to add them in, there was the decision to not single out any one group. And let me not jog our memory about how we don't want to single out particular groups after last city council meeting. And so I don't think it's particularly fair that we say, okay, Canby Kids, you get $80,000, but we essentially cut the money to go towards a sister city program, which killed that, and that was a pretty decent program. And we have other organizations in the city that when we cut those funds off, they essentially withered and died on the vine. So I think that there is an avenue for Canby Kids to get that money by applying for grants through the community grant process. And as I understand, that process has been adapted so they're able to request more money through that through those grants. If folks think that $20,000 is more reasonable, then that's fine. But I am not a fan of specifically calling out a particular group for funding when we are then not going to fund other groups that want that money. So that's that. What I was going to talk about was the reserve question. So I personally am not a fan of us hoarding 25% of money. I think 20 to 21% is much more reasonable. But I will say I was on the council. And Mr. Mayor, I believe you were on that council as well. And I don't know if you, Jack, were on this budget committee at that point in time, when we had to sit around this table and make some really hard choices, and we had to let staff go, and staff brought their families in and put us on the spot. And so I am for having a healthy reserve. Is 25% necessary? I don't know. I think there are other factors we need to take into consideration as to deciding that. You know, what is the current prevailing wages? You know, like how does that mechanism shift? What are, you know, how bad did it get the last time it got bad, and how close are we now percentage-wise, you know, factoring in inflation and stuff? I think there's ways of doing that, but again, we have been talking as a council about sitting down and having a real good, thorough discussion about what our reserves are, what we really want them to be, and how, if we have too much, we can release that money back into the community. But again, that is a conversation that we as a council have not had. And so here we are, another budget cycle, where we've said we were gonna have this conversation, and we didn't. And we can't deliver to this group that information. So if that's the case, I think that is something else that needs to be prioritized for the next budget cycle, is what does that look like?
I'm adding it to the list. I told Mr. Mayor, I'm keeping a list of council discussion. We have our own little parking lot for these kind of discussions later. So I put reserves on that list.
So
Chris is
the
okay.
decision that the council did make about having 20 to 25% was not that discussion.
The 80, which discussion?
About revising the reserves from 30 to 40%, which is what it was, down to 20 to 25%. I thought that discussion had been had.
I thought it was too. Mr. Mayor?
I recall that we had that conversation.
Yeah, we used to have a much larger reserve.
Prior to the budget,
Right.
even conversation beginning,
Right.
of coming down closer to that 20%, keeping it between 20 and 25, which
Yeah.
is where we're
Yeah,
at.
Well, in 2023, we had 58 according to page 39, so it's considerably less.
My recollection would be that it probably occurred during your mid-year budget review that we had.
Possible.
Then maybe I
Yeah.
blacked out for that one. If everybody else says we had a conversation, then I must have blacked out during it. I still think that 25% is too high. I think that 20 to 21% would be more reasonable. And, again, we go back to the citizens of this community expect to get a certain amount of service from their tax dollars. And if we're sitting on it, they're not getting it.
Councilor Maldonado.
I just wanted to put a little input in on the Canby Kids issue at hand. I vaguely recommend us promising, I couldn't remember the exact amount. I thought it was somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000. Regardless of the fact, I want to see them actually get a little bit of that, just for some fact is I know we have some things on the horizon right now, and I think it would be beneficial to them and their programs that would actually help them with what's going on.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you. Question for Scott. In the reserves, I know taxes for everybody, we don't receive taxes. Taxes don't come in until November from the assessor's office. What's the expense that it takes from July to November for the city to operate? Do you know that amount?
Not off the top of my head, I'd have to go, are you asking for like actuals from this?
Well, have you projected how much you need per month to when taxes come in, when we're in the dry
For
spell?
a quick estimate, I would just divide it by 2 for operate for the first 6 months. That would be the safest, is just divide what we have by 2.
Okay,
Because it'd be
and
for
so
the first
then
6
that
months.
comes out of the reserves.
Well, not necessarily, because we're still billing people every day for sewer,
Services
those
and
kind of
stuff like
things.
that. But as
So
far as
money's still
taxes
coming in.
go,
Well,
Property
as far as taxes go, they would come, but if I were to give you like the LGIP statements where the property taxes get dumped into, it doesn't get all dumped in 1 month. We actually do get some coming in on a month-to-month basis.
but not from July to November. We do not
We do
receive tax.
actually, yeah. If I were to show you those LGIP statements, they're not as significant as when they come in after,
November.
collections in November, December, January. Those are gonna be our big 3 months where the majority comes in. But we do have other, from property taxes coming in because of late payers, prior collections. So there is money coming in, but if I were to give you a percentage, I would probably say about 70, 75, 80% comes in within those 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I agree with the Canby Kids. I think we should keep that, what was recommended here was 8,000. I'd raise that to 10,000 for Canby Kids. I do remember having a discussion with them on that.
Yes, Councilor Patton.
If that's the case, then we as a council need to be prepared for other groups to come in and want money earmarked for them. And if next budget cycle, people come in and request that money, and they are not granted that money, I will write this down, I will remember this.
Yes, Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I respectfully disagree with my colleagues to my right. I actually do agree with Councilor Patton that the Canby kids, although near and dear to my heart, and they should be going through a grant process, just like everybody else would be expected to. We don't recognize one group over another in many other areas, and so financially we shouldn't either. Like I said, I have nothing against Canby kids. My kids grew up playing soccer and everything. They're very, very near and dear to my heart organization. I just don't believe that they should just be automatically granted city taxpayer funds. So I'm a no on that line item change.
That sounds like 3-2.
Thank you. So, Daniel, did we answer your question about why the reserves?
I don't quite think the discussion that's taken place that needs to take place, which is, okay, with a round number, there's $1 million more than what is recommended now. If it's a bad recommendation that we have that in reserves, then we can say that's a bad recommendation. 15 to 18 is bad, we want more. Or, but I don't know that we've come up with a reason why all the things on the parking lot list could be funded. I'm not saying we should, but they could be funded out of the difference between what's recommended and what we have. And I know I do it every day. I go cold, hard numbers to people and they can start crying on my lap. And I do that at work all the time. But today I was telling somebody that $1,000 a month for dog food is probably excessive. But
How many dogs do they have?
just a dog and a cat, actually. But anyway, and so back to the question on the reserve. Now, there's the issue with the Canby kids, which is the $8,000 or $10,000 question, and the other one's $1 million question. So I see that as a bigger issue is what is our justification for tying up capital, which is why I look at it, for what I think may be no purpose other than to smooth out a unexpected budget shortfall. Because obviously if inflation happens and wages go up, that'll save us a little bit, but just delay the cuts and smooth that out. So I think that's just an issue that needs to be brought up. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to having the extra $1 million tied up, but I'm not seeing a reason to not spend that unless it's, not sustainable. Like, for example, if we're going to hire police officers and lay them off next year, I say that's a bad idea. But I'm just wondering if I've not seen justification for having $1 million of capital tied up doing nothing.
Well, and again, I just wanted to reiterate, we go in the Wayback Machine, we bumped the reserve up because it got rough last economic downturn. We had to, we really cut into our reserves a lot, and which then ultimately led in staff reduction and service cutbacks at the library, city hall, like all sorts of things. And so did we course correct too much the other direction to tie up, more money that could be invested in other things? Maybe. But I don't think it was the wrong decision at the time to make. So are we now maybe coming back to a better balance of what's the best way to invest that money? You're right, we could probably knock off a lot of those things that we're talking about here on the parking lot, but is that the right way to go?
Yeah, and I just think that's just discussion needs to happen. Obviously, whatever happened in the past is a sunk cost. We don't like to consider that. We're saying, what are we doing now with what we have? And it's the $10,000 question of grant to Canby kids, I'm agreeing with, Hensley. I just don't see, I know of dozens and dozens and dozens of nonprofits in Canby. I work with them. Why does one deserve it, not the other? I don't think we're job of government to pick favorites that way. But if it's only 10,000, I'm not going to fight over it as much as I like the $1 million question, you know?
Just may I add to that piece of it, like if we, to Councilor Patton's idea, because right now, if I'm.
So there's two issues up. One's the $10,000 and the other one is.
Right, there is the Canby Kids issue.
Yeah, so-
And then the reserve question. So just wanted to know you're kind
Maybe we
of
should-
toggling back and forth between.
I don't know if we'll solve
I
it.
think we are, based on the budget we have in front of us, we're at that, I mean.
We're budgeting a
still
reserve.
within that 20 to 25, so
Right.
we said that that's where we wanted to be,
Which is
so.
down from 58, so I think we've already course corrected. We over course corrected, like you said. Look at page 39.
No, I.
But you're
looked at
right,
this,
I think we
believe you.
knee jerked, we were scared because of what had happened. We course corrected off the other way too much, and we backed it off to 2025. From 40 and 30, what was it, 40 and 58 or something like that?
Okay, so we're still within the window we talked about,
Yes,
and so.
given
Do we push
the,
it, you know,
You
if we
pointed out
want to
that-
do these things, and it's a matter of getting closer to that 20%. That's the question. We're in the window that we set, that we wanted to be in.
yeah.
And we still have room to stay in that window if we're looking to make the investment on certain things that we've been talking about here on the parking lot list or in other areas.
And it
So-
is my understanding that Canby Kids did apply for a community grant this year.
And
So
that's where I'm going with my comment, is maybe the budget committee needs to consider taking the Canby Kid dollars and taking it down to zero, spreading it out and upping the community small grants in the budget by 10, take it to 75, and then spread the rest through, whether that's park maintenance pieces, or we also talked about starting the turf reserve fund, for Maple Street Park was another thing that we talked about. So, I mean, that's all fine, well and good. So, I mean, I'm on again, my mindset being, want to help Canby kids. I'm on the Canby Youth Football Board. I know what they're going through in terms of equipment costs and et cetera. But I think that's where the small grants piece comes in, either Canby Kids as a collective whole or each of those individual groups. I will I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that's not a bad idea. It's at 50 grand now, so you're proposing we change it to 60 or 70?
Yeah, so the community small grants, I'm looking at page 72.
Oh, I'm looking at 49.
Under the
70.
economic development line. So it's currently budgeted at 50, taking that to, I'd even say go 75. So, I'll stop.
All right, Counselor Pab.
So I think what I'm getting is the reserve window, the size of the reserve window is locked in for this budget. We're gonna leave it as is. But then as a council, we can have a discussion as to, what size we want that window to be for the next budget cycle. Does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Yes.
The other thing it sounds like is there might be a bit of a dogfight when it comes to what to do with that $80,000. And we'll duke that out when we get to the amendment portion of the budget. Does that sound right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Sure.
We're noted.
My idea already got shot down, but I have others.
So,
Scott? Yeah.
So, Commissioner Hensley, when you're talking about 58%, you're looking at the actual numbers?
On page
On page
39, yeah.
So 58% is the actual ending fund balance of what was actually the operating revenue.
Right, which is up from 47, and then last year it was 26, and now proposed for this year's 23.
Right.
So we're in that window.
So basically, you're really comparing apples and oranges, because we're looking at actual numbers, and then we're talking about budgeted numbers. Because we have to take into account guesses when you were looking at that. So that's not what actually happened in reality. If we try to go back in time to look at what was budgeted in '23, my guess is we never had 58% as an ending fund balance.
Well, I'll find out tonight. I have all the stats of these guys,
Yeah.
because I'm a nerd about this. I have all of these at home.
But I think that's
This is
where,
last year.
because at first I was confused where you're getting 58, and then I'm like, oh, it's the actual number you're talking about. And then you were
So
comparing
we
that to
actually
the
saved
budget.
more than we hoped to.
Right. We
Well, good,
actually
look at us.
didn't spend as what we thought probably. And
Okay. See, on my home budget, I would be rejoicing. But now we're here going, hey, we have too much money.
So shall we set aside the Canby Kids item for the time being? Put it on the parking lot list and come back?
Sure.
Leave it on the parking lot. I
Leave
think
it on
it's
the
already on
parking,
it.
well, yeah.
Move it to the potential amendment list.
Removing
Right.
parking spots.
Okay. Moving into the other comments section of the budget. Budget Committee Member DeGraw commented on the park capital outlay that he does not think now is the time to add an additional park regarding Auburn Farms Park. That we can't maintain the parks we have now. And the dog park, does Canby really need another dog park? We currently have a very nice one over by Fred Meyer's. This is 2.4 million that the city could use for more important things. So, is there any,
I have a comment.
okay,
Well, as far as this number one, Auburn Farms, we're in the process moving forward with that currently. I recommend I don't know how we would stop it. We get the park built and then we address the issues on personnel when we get it built. We got a long ways to go to get it built. We're just in the design now. And to answer the dog park, there's no dog park in this year's budget. So that'll be a discussion for next budget if it appears in next year's budget. We pushed that out. To answer the 2.4 million, it wouldn't come to that. It would just be the Auburn Farms budget, which is 1.6 million, whereas 1.5 million for Auburn Farms.
Yes, Counselor Pat?
And the lion's share of that money to build that park, is it coming from SDCs or is it coming?
100% SDCs.
Yeah, so ultimately, the money that we wouldn't be able to spend it to maintain parks anyways. So.
We need to start spending parks SDCs. So this is a good project.
And Counselor Davis?
Well, I think it'd be helpful for Mr. McGraw to understand the park master plan, because it's all listed in the Parks Master Plan. He may not have had the opportunity to review that yet.
Yep. And that's all I had on that.
okay. Anything more that the Budget Committee wants to do with this suggestion? Okay, keep going. So there were other adjustments that were proposed by staff that have been worked into the budget document already. So I wanted to just walk through those. So on page 61 in the planning program, the professional and technical services line, we proposed to go from 280,000 to 300,000, so we're adding $20,000. So that, Dawn, was a little bit of extra money for
Oh, wow. I feel like I'm getting more official as we go.
Yes, I just wanted to cover that. We're scoping out the fiscal year 24-25 comprehensive plan, transportation system plan work. And there was a somewhat of a slight oversight, and I'll take responsibility for that, on not addressing the area that's called Special Area J, which is out by Jarbo's Restaurant, and that's intended to be mixed use in its nature. Our current comprehensive plan calls it out, although the pre-zoning out there on the comp plan right now does not reflect that. That's where Walnut Street Extension will also go through. There's a desire in our comprehensive plan to have a mix of densities out there and also commercial development. So the idea behind the $20,000 would be for our traffic consultants to be able to go through a transportation planning rule process, which is required if we're going to change the comprehensive plan designations as part of this comprehensive plan update process. That's really the only area that I see that we probably would be doing that. Would be largely leaving the comprehensive plan designations for the areas within the city and the current urban growth boundary the same. But that area in particular, because of the investment that the city's making, and it is kind of primed for mixed use out there. There was actually a study back in 2005, but the plan was never adopted by council, which reflects mixed use as well. So we believe, and there's some willing property owners out there to desiring to do that kind of a mix of use out there. So we felt like this would be a good opportunity to bring that forward as part of the comprehensive plan work, to have the transportation piece addressed as part of that. Thus the $20,000 extra. If I had thought about that soon enough, I would have probably you wouldn't even be seeing me here tonight. But trying to just address it so we don't end up having a deficiency in our process. So we would appreciate that addition, and hopefully that answers the questions.
Hey,
Thanks, Don.
next three items appear on page 68 regarding the park program. So the Canby Kids, we already had a discussion about that. South Canby Dog Park will take the $450,000 out of the budget for that. And we'll add in Wait Park Master Plan and improvements for $300,000. So any comments there?
Yes, Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first, I'm still not agreeing on the $8,000 to be left in the parks budget for Canby Kids. I believe that should be moved to the community grant.
Okay.
And actually, my vote kind of depends on some of these changes. South Canby Dog Park was $450,000, and we're only adding $300 to Wait Park Master Plan. So where's the other $150K going?
It'll go back into the unappropriated ending fund balance.
Okay, so you could use it for people to mow or things like this, or can it be used for deferred maintenance costs?
If it's the dog park, it would
Well,
be
it's-
SDC's.
It's,
That's ICC money?
Which one were
Okay.
you talking about? Sorry.
I'm talking about the 450 we're taking out for the park.
That was.
That was SDC money.
That bit park was in the master plan, was to be used SDC money.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not just going, so that 150, we're just kind of holding on to it for next year's budget to put back on the dog park?
Yep.
Okay.
Or whatever, the
whatever.
CIP, whatever we,
The dog park's still on the CIP, correct?
it is
Okay.
for the following year. And they made an updated one you'll see in your new budget that Scott and Katie sent me today that I looked at.
Okay.
And I showed the parks chair and he was like, this is what we all had in mind.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
on page 73, the ARPA expenses is increasing $210,000 to take into account the Canby Utility Board allocation as well. So the 750 was 500 for the adult center, 250 for the fairgrounds, then the 210 that would be added to it would be for the amount that was allocated to Canby Utility Board. And then there was a small change in the transfer to the library. And I don't recall what that was for. Sorry. Marissa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I can just a little bit to that. So
Okay.
part of the reason that that money was, that we had to change those numbers is one, because we got some extra grant funding, so that's why the supplies and services line going up. And then as far as the transfer from the general fund goes, Scott might be able to fill in better, but that is probably mostly like just in case. I can promise you that we will not spend any money that we don't absolutely need to spend, but I will also mention too that that 330 to 5,000 is less than this current fiscal year, so we still have been cutting.
Okay.
Quick,
Yes.
thank you. I'm sorry, I'm so bothersome today. Question, we had a little discussion earlier about the tax dollars not coming in until November and, you know, how do we tie it over until then? I'm just curious, why is it that the library fund is the only one that seems to need an interfund loan to make it to July or make it to November? Everybody else seems to manage. I'm just, nothing against the library or I'm just curious, why is that the only fund that needs a loan to get there?
That has to do with the timing of the library district. So.
Okay, it's more about the library district than the property taxes, so that's why we're doing it.
Right.
Because their other part of their funds come from, okay.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Those funds will come until January,
Gotcha.
February.
Yeah.
Well, the library district is delayed more. Gotcha, okay, that's all, I just was curious.
Yeah, because they're essentially their own taxing
Their own
district,
little-
and they don't have the reserve to draw from like
Right.
the city does.
So they gotta wait for their taxes and then they do their thing and, gotcha, that makes sense.
Okay.
Then within the library fund, we were increasing the grants that the library is receiving to 16,707. Again, that transfer from the library fund, and then supplies and services was increasing, and that was the city-led homeless grant that the library was receiving. So those are those changes there. Any questions at all on those? So we're just going to make those, actually, those changes have already been made to the budget, and Scott doesn't need to recalculate the reserve based on these changes. They've already been calculated, so. So back to the issue of, so moving on to May 23rd, there were questions that were asked about the library interest, and Councillor Hensley would like to continue the discussion on the payback from the library or the cemetery perpetual care fund. She asked if there were other funds that could be used to fulfill the loan to the library. For example, sewer fund has funds that could be a possibility or share between all funds. Councillor Patton also brought up wanting to build the library fund. Wanting to build up the library fund may take several years to build it up. So the response is that any fund that makes a loan to the library fund is going to incur the same impact as the cemetery perpetual care fund. The impact is more apparent because than it used to be because of the high rate of earnings in the LGPI currently. So the only way to minimize the impact on the library fund is for the general fund to absorb this cost, which again impacts the bottom line with the general fund as well. So we don't have an answer for other than if the council were to decide that that you didn't want to charge interest, then that would be the only way to to not have this payment picked up by the library fund.
But if we didn't, if the cemetery perpetual fund didn't charge the interest, then they're losing that interest, and that's a fund that is kind of got a limited revenue. I mean, it's paid for by the folks that buy plots.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I like that. I put that discussion, actually, I didn't know that was going on the actual parking lot. I put that on the council discussion for later because I didn't think we were going to be changing anything on it in this budget. So I'm not really interested in trying to make a change on it this year.
Okay.
But I did put it on the council discussion so we could explore how we might want to address that in the next year's budget.
Great.
So unless somebody else wants to do something about it tonight, I'm good with leaving it on the council parking lot.
Counselor Pat?
Yeah, I agree. I think we had kind of discussed that as a council, we would decide, you know, is there something we can do in like a supplemental budget if we, as a council, decide not to charge them the interest? And then I would like to see part of that discussion also be, how do we start over a course of period of time, build up a reserve for the library so they don't have to do this?
Okay, Budget Committee member Bert DeGraw inquired if the former First Transit building, and hopefully Todd is making his way down to here. So I'll let Todd report back on what he found out about that property.
The property in question is owned by Kahoot, and they do not want to sell it. They are in negotiations for a lease for it, and they want about $26,000 a month to lease it if it was even available, which is well beyond my budgetary abilities. So it's a nice piece of property, but it's pretty far beyond our abilities, even if it existed for use. So
Stay the course.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Tom.
And then the final item, before we get to Darrow's correspondence received this afternoon, was that to look at coming up with more measurable performance measures for the street maintenance, and we will certainly do that as we convene the street maintenance task force. So don't really have any budgetary impacts on that, so. And I guess I should also say that I didn't look at the performance metrics in the budget very closely this year. So I want to look at all of those over the course of the year and make sure that we're not counting widgets, but we're actually making, you know, measurable progress towards items, so.
Yes, Counselor Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we get to Mr. Hollison's memo and discuss that, since Jerry's still sitting here, it's not on the parking lot, and if it was asked in the meeting, I missed the answer and I apologize, but I noticed that there's $335K for the fuel station coming out of the Parks Fund, and I'm just wondering why it's coming out of the Parks.
Because they're going to use the fuel station, and we divided it up between every department in the city that will be using it.
Any department in the city that will be using
Yep.
the fuel gets kind of chunk.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and this is going to help them be more efficient too, not having to drive the other end of town
Okay.
to fuel and stuff, so.
No, that makes sense. I
Yep.
was just curious how I missed that, so thank you.
No, I don't think we talked about it, but I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Yes, Counselor Davis.
So what is the cost of the fuel station?
I don't have my book, but I think it's up to $1,600,000. Million, what is it, Scott?
Which page?
The fuel station,
1.7 is what the cumulative estimated cost.
1.7, it goes out to bid here in several weeks, so we'll have more accurate costs of what it's gonna be, but we put safe numbers in there, so we're hoping to be way under that.
And it's coming out of park,
General fund.
general fund.
General fund, yeah,
Got
no SDCs, it'll be just general fund.
Got it.
That's it, yep,
Thank you.
yep.
That was my only question on that. Thank you.
Okay, you have a memo in front of you from Mr. Powelson. Do you want to review your memo by chance?
Mr. Paulson?
Mr. Powelson?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to review your memo, or do you just want to have us address it?
It should probably be read into the record.
Do you want me to, do you want me to discuss what we talked about on the phone earlier?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll have Jason speak for me. My voice is pretty much gone.
Okay.
I hope he feels better soon. He doesn't sound like he feels great.
Doesn't sound good.
So do you
Did
want to
everybody-
read the whole memo into the record, or
Has everybody
just
read
have
the
it
memo?
entered in?
Okay. It's on paper in the record, that's probably fine.
So if I may, Mr. Paulson reached out to me, and he and I had a chat about this. And I told him that I agreed that something like this might be a good option for us to look at. But I informed him about some of the changes that are going to be coming to the Economic Development Department as we wrap up things with the Urban Renewal District. I also had mentioned that trying to implement something like this into the budget when it's this far baked along would be very difficult. That this is the sort of thing that is good for members of the budget committee to add into what would be the longer term parking lot, or what Council President Hensley is building as far as discussions that the council need to have as far as what sort of goals we're going to give the city administrator for the next budget cycle and things to consider into that. So I had chatted with him and said that, considering he is not on council, I would be happy to champion this along the process, bringing it to the city council and making sure that it doesn't die on the vine as far as how this might work in future budgets, when something like this might be able to be implemented, and then make sure that he stays up to date on how that all looks. Does that sound about right, Mr. Paulson? Thumbs up, okay. I was halfway paying attention while I was driving.
And Mr. Paulson, I have attached your memo to my council discussion list.
Just for the record, I think there are some great suggestions in this memo. It brings to mind one of the things that I would like to think about over the course of the next year, and perhaps bring it to the next budget cycle, is whether it is time to have a full-time public information officer here at the city. So this plays right into that. So, yes, go ahead.
Something else I will throw out that came up in our discussion on this was the thought of having an asset manager. So we have a lot of assets within the city. How are they tracked? How are we keeping track of their worth? The other part of that is if we have a lot of institutional knowledge. And one of the things that we saw with the finance department when some changes happened there was that individuals left and there was a drain of information. And the previous finance director had worked on creating manuals and stuff for how these different things worked. So that way if someone left, that institutional knowledge wasn't drained out. And so I had kind of recommended to Mr. Paulson that this is another really good topic for this group to sort of send up to council to have a discussion on how do we look at that asset management tracking, what do we currently use, and how is that being done, and then also how we can move forward with capturing some of that institutional knowledge so if something happens, it doesn't just go away. And I had mentioned that those are sort of things that play into the next budget cycle, because it might not be something that the city can tackle currently with staff, but it might be something where there's a group that you can contract to do that initial heavy lift of taking pictures of all of this stuff, creating that record, and writing all that stuff down, then is passed on to the city departments and stuff to then keep up to date as time moves on. So does that sound about right?
Thumbs up.
Oh my gosh, look at that. I'm 2 for 2. I love it. Okay. So those are some things that I had mentioned, and whatever discussion the group would like to have on it, it's great, but those were the two things that I chatted with him about regarding these things that he had put forward.
Okay.
Could I say one thing real quick on that?
I had a meeting with our wastewater treatment plant supervisor this morning, and you guys will be seeing budget requests in the next budget for asset management. So that all of us people that have been here forever, we can pass that all on. So it's something that we have to work on. So I just wanted to pass that on to Councilor Patton.
Awesome.
Yep.
We just need to clone you if you think you're gonna leave.
We kind of have. There's a whole bunch of us down there.
Another one of him in the shop right now.
Okay, so, yes,
Go ahead.
I was just going to move us along.
So was I, so go ahead.
We have one item on the parking lot list. Well, two items. What do you want to do with,
We're moving the 8,000 from parks to economic development. 8,000 from parks to economic.
Is this a race to a motion, or what are we doing here?
so what was the first
We're on the
item? though?
amendment thing, aren't we?
It's the same thing. I think it's just, what are we doing with the 80,000? Are we moving it because it's going to affect?
Then we have
So do you want to, so adding to the budget 50,000 for an emergency management, no, a grant?
That was a work session, I believe.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
So the 80,000.
Yes, Mayor?
Thank you.
thank you.
I have in my
Okay.
notes here that we were gonna dedicate $50,000 to, or the conversation piece was, here's my list that I heard us talk about. $50,000 for an emergency services, emergency manager, consultant
Consultant.
training for staff.
Right,
50K for that.
that's what I was trying
There
to
was a
say.
conversation piece, which I don't think we necessarily cleared off, was adding another officer at 180,000. Then there was the discussion of a parks person at 100 and, I rounded up, 101,000. Okay, and then sidebar was the $80,000 that was in the Canby Kids line. We have a number of ideas on the table. So we can eliminate, so I don't know if we can eliminate some of these other ones pretty quickly. So it's up to the budget committee. Do you want to take each of these motion by motion, discussion by discussion, for process of elimination?
Did we have the grant writer as well on there, or we decided to table that for later?
That's on the council discussion.
It's on the
Okay,
council
council.
discussion
Work session.
for mid-year, potential mid-year budget piece. So that's what I had.
My understanding was that there was a discussion about not adding the officer or the street maintenance. So those are off the
Okay.
table. So the only items that are on the table are 50,000 for the emergency management consultant, and what are we going to do with the Canby Kids budget allocation?
Correct.
Yes, Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if you want to consider this an idea or a motion. I guess I'll just make a motion that we take the 80,000 from Canby Kids and put $10,000 into the community grant fund, so they have the opportunity to apply for that money through a grant, and 50,000 of it to the emergency management consultant fees, leaving $20,000 that this committee can still talk about where to put it.
Second.
Yeah, very good. Very strict. Yeah, good, very strict.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So.
There's a motion on the table. We need to vote. Or
Well,
there's
discussion.
yeah.
Discussion.
Discussion.
Well, there's still the ambiguous $20,000.
Right, we can do that in the discussion, I suppose, and I'll accept amendment to my motion. That's what I said, y'all can talk about the
So a
20.
motion on the table with a second, and so
We have discussion and the
Councilor Patton,
second, Patton wants
discussion
to
item.
discuss.
So I would like to see the remaining $20,000 go into one of these lines that I had mentioned as far as park. Actually, what I was thinking of doing was up, instead of $10,000, upping the amount going into the grant program to 20,
That would leave 10
which
then.
would leave 10 for the to be put elsewhere. And I was going to see if it was okay if I query our Jerry as to, of these three lines, which one would he prefer to see $10,000 in, or split over, park ground maintenance, park building maintenance, or parking lot maintenance and repair, is what I was planning to do.
You got a question?
Yes, sorry. Counselor Davis?
Thank you. I support the motion with the $20,000. I'd like to see 10,000 go to Canby Kids and 10,000 go to Maple Street turf replacement.
So 10 to the grant fund for them to apply for, you mean, like I proposed? So 10 for the,
No.
but, and instead of 20 as Jason's proposing, Counselor Patton, you want it to be 10 to Maple Street. I'm writing down so we can, I'll amend my
I
motion.
wanted, yeah, $10,000 to Canby Kids and $10,000 to the turf replacement in Maple Street Park.
You want it to go to Candy Goods directly.
Yeah, that's a separate motion.
I can't support that motion.
So we have a first motion on the table that, right, how's that work?
Well,
The only reason, I'm sorry, but the only reason that I did that is because I know we had Canby Kids here, and I know we made a commitment to Canby Kids. And to me, we're reneging on what we told them we would do. And if we had a Parks Department that had to schedule the activities that Canby Kids does, it would be a lot more money than $10,000.
Eileen, didn't you say they applied for the grant already?
They did for this current year, yeah. Right.
So they're already getting the money through the appropriate, in my view, appropriate avenue.
Well, we haven't approved that grant yet.
I guess just for clarification, there's a motion on the table to do what Council President Hensley said. Then I was essentially making a friendly amendment to, instead of doing $20,000 into a lump sum, to actually up the amount going into the community park grants that the Canby Kids could apply for, up that by another $10,000. So that money is essentially being shifted over into there. So they would be able to apply for that through the program. And then asking Jerry, of the remaining $10,000, what line in the park maintenance stuff would that remaining $10,000 be best served in?
So then Jim's putting out his.
So I guess
his
what
friendly
needs to happen
amendment as well.
is there needs to be a decision as to whether my friendly amendment stands.
Well, there needs to be a second to it. So, and I don't totally support it. And it's just, I support part of it. I kind of support both of you a little bit. I can't get on board with going directly, here's 10,000 for you Canby Kids. I'm all about apply for the grant and you'll likely get it, but just apply for the grant like everybody else. I don't really necessarily want to go up 20 though. I'll give 10 more because we were going to allocate 8. So I'm giving 2 extra. I'm good with the Maple Street turf though at 10K and Jerry's 10K.
Just to comment on the Maple Street turf, that would be increasing the reserve from 25,000 to 35,000. So we already have 25,000 in the
Yeah,
budget.
that was another thing that I was going to talk about.
Good.
Okay, so we don't need more in that fund is what you're saying, Eileen?
I'm gonna disagree with
I
that,
was
but
gonna
that's
say-
not this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with going to 35 because we don't know what that's going to cost when it comes down the pike, right?
Right.
So,
And that was intended to just be a first year kind of deposit amount, so.
okay, then maybe it'll be clearer if I just amend my own motion. I amend my motion to read that we take the $80,000 from Canby Kids, put $50,000 to the emergency management consultant, $10,000 to the community grant, $10,000 to Maple Street's turf fund, and $10,000 to the Jerry fund, how he wants to spend it.
Parks.
The parks fund.
Parking lot.
Parking lot. There we go.
You want it in parking lots?
The paving the parking lot.
Okay.
I'm a little under budget on that.
Okay, so 10K to Jerry's parking lot.
I'll second the amendment.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Counselor Davis.
there any other discussion on that matter?
I want to make sure that I caught the amounts. So 50,000 to the emergency management coordinator or contract. 10,000 to community grants. 10,000 to parking lot maintenance. And then then 10,000 to turf.
From 25 to 35, yeah.
Okay. So what is not getting allocated is anything that can be kids.
Not
Because-
directly.
Directly, because they are.
They're going through the grant.
Okay.
And
Yes, Counselor Pat?
I know that grant window is closed, correct? No.
Tomorrow.
So I would say that as a counselor, I will recommend that when we get to the council hats, that we, similar to last year where there was funding in there and then the cutoff was extended so that folks could come in, that we kind of give Jamie, well, through Eileen, Jamie, the recommendation that we extend that proposal process so that, or amend it in a way that Canby kids can get some money, essentially.
They are working on an application
They
already.
have submitted an application
Okay.
already.
Yeah, but from what I understand, it's not like, how much is it? Or am I not allowed to know?
Well, I don't have that in front of me, and I don't-
Okay.
We haven't looked at them because we haven't reviewed any of the
Okay.
applications. But they can apply for up to $3,500. Last year, we allowed them to apply for the max per sport, which is 5 sports, so that means that they'd be eligible of up to 17,500 this year.
Okay, there you go.
Perfect, okay.
All right,
Down the vote.
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion so carried.
Okay. That wasn't too hard.
Okay, yes, Counselor Patton.
I would just like to bring people's attention to the turf reserve. So I am super happy that it is in here, because this is something that I had recommended that we do. But I will just point out that I'm sorry, what? Oh, page 40.
Thank you.
And it's all the way down towards the bottom, under reserved for future expenses. It says Maple Park turf replacement, 25,000, which would now be 35, correct? I know that there was discussion at council that it's not gonna cost like $1 million necessarily to replace the turf, because it's gonna be patched over time and you don't have to do the whole basin stuff. But my guess is that a conservative estimate if we did need to replace all of that turf, it's gonna probably be more than $500,000 in 8 or so years. If we build that reserve at at that time when I did this math, at $25,000 a year, it's gonna take 20 years to build the reserve to a point where it will be able to fund $500,000 worth of turf replacement. I think that as a council, we need to look at that again and make a recommendation for putting more money into that reserve annually, and target more of a $500,000 in 8 years rather than 20. And the whole reason behind this is because I don't want to see the park maintenance fee or whatever that is at that point in time hit with this huge expense that then has to detract from all the other services that people that utilize the parks want to see. So that is just something I'm throwing out for the good, a thought that I'm throwing out for the good of the order.
So you want me to put that on the consultant, or the council
Yeah.
parking lot list? Okay, gotcha.
It's awesome to see it in there. I just would like to see it a little more.
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Maldonado.
You almost got it, that's right. Jerry, what was the likelihood, I know we discussed it slightly, what was the likelihood of a full replacement happening? Because I know we do replace it piece by piece over time, but if we're doing it that route, a full replacement is only deemed necessary when? 8 to 10?
8 to 10.
Was it 8 to 10? Okay.
Yeah.
And is that with basin?
That's leaving the base.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Tate, you had a question.
Just before we get to adjournment, I just wanted to take a moment and say, having been through this now for the first time, I am extremely impressed with the job that our city administrator, and finance director did, but especially with all of the department heads, the work that you put into doing this, the candid way that you addressed questions and helped us to understand what was going on was greatly appreciated for somebody going through the process the first time. It was very professional, and I would just like to personally recognize all of you and say you just did a great job on preparing this budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second. I agree, thank you. All right, and Counselor Stearns.
Just to add on to what for Councilor Patton said, I think in general, any reserve funds for replacement of a particular asset should be adjusted each year based on inflation rates. So we should not be in the mindset that $5,000 or $25,000 today is going to be the same as $25,000 next year. I think that thinking may have caused a little bit of budget problems, say with some of the fees out there that are not indexed to inflation. So I think we should always be talking about future value and incrementing them each year.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Okay, we are ready for a motion to adopt the budget. If we are ready, if the budget committee is ready.
I do want to just ask one more question.
Yes.
I would like to talk about the mid-year budget review, but will there be an opportunity after we go through this part to be able to talk about that? Or are we going straight into adjournment?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we do have the urban renewal to get to, but yeah. Okay, so this first motion is a motion that Counselor Sassy will not participate in because he's got a potential conflict of interest. So I need somebody to move that the Budget Committee of the City of Canby approve the budget for the general fund, planning and building program, street fund and sewer combined fund for the fiscal year 24-25 in the amount of $22,397,271.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thanks for saying all that.
You're welcome.
So it's moved by Jim
Davis, Councilman Davis moved it and I seconded it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
You have to do it.
so, any questions?
Any discussion, yeah.
Any discussion?
I think we discussed it for 3 days.
Oh, yes, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
And one abstention.
One abstention would be
One
Sassy.
abstention. Okay, yes. And
His family
motion,
member.
motion passes. One move.
Your next motion would be to move that the Budget Committee of the City of Canby approve the budget for the general fund for all remaining programs, the library fund, the transit fund, the swim center fund, the transient room tax fund, system development charges fund, cemetery perpetual care fund, the forfeiture fund, the facilities fund, the fleet fund, and the technical services fund for fiscal year 24-25 in the amount of $72,485,159.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
It was moved by 2 people though.
Sorry.
So
You want to rock, paper, scissors for it?
let's let the citizen do it.
There we go.
I'm the citizen.
Chapin moved, Patton second.
Okay, any questions or any other discussion?
Counselor Sassy, you can vote on this motion.
Okay?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Unanimous.
Motion passed.
And the third motion would be to move that the Budget Committee of the City of Canby recommend the levy of property taxes for the 24-25 fiscal year in the amount of $3.4886 per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes and 49 cents per 1,000 of assessed value for the swim center local option levy.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, Aaron. Hensley Chapin.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Unanimous.
Motion passed.
So before we adjourn, Counselor, this would be that time.
Yeah, I would just like to recommend that we start looking in October to schedule a mid-year budget review sometime in November. And have it be of this entire group set up in this way, rather than how it was last time, where it was just us up on the dais and, the budget committee, if they wanted to come, they could. It's great that we got that first step, and I know things were chaotic and stuff, but this is really the format that I would like to see that mid-year budget review. So I'm kind of memorializing the benchmarks this year in this discussion, so that way we don't lose track of it, if that makes sense.
I would agree. I agree.
Yeah.
After October 15th.
Well, yeah. Well, right, well, we meet in November. We'll talk about picking a date in October.
It won't quite be mid-year, since mid-year is January.
Well, then, yeah.
So that we have the December financial data
Okay,
in
well
the
then,
system.
January.
Pick a date for
then.
January.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, if it's January, it potentially could be a new council, so.
right.
Potentially.
Or if we do it in November or December, then it's still us.
Well, it wouldn't matter, because honestly, a mid-year review, if there's a change in council members, a mid-year review would be a great way for those folks to get up to speed. So January is the time to do it.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
I think first, I think we should thank all of the Citizen Budget Committee members for their service.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being willing to take the chair.
Yes, okay.
So with that, Madam Chair, I move we adjourn this portion of the Budget Committee meeting for the city budget.
Second.
Okay,
Hensley Davis.
motion passes.
No, we did not vote.
We need a vote.
It's
All those in
non-debatable.
favor, sorry. Aye.
I'm not sure how
Aye,
hard.
aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay. It's one dissenting vote. Patton.
I like to throw that in there every once in a while.
Okay, now we can
All right.
take the renewal, and Mr. Sassy needs to.
Huh?
You save it for council.
I like to just spread the love around.
Could we take a,
Do we need
could we
a
take a 5-minute break?
5-minute recess?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Go Scott.
Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the Canby Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting. Roll call.
Jason Patton, City Council.
Elizabeth Chapin, Budget Committee member.
Buddy Committee, I like that. Tracy Hensley, City Council President, URA Commissioner.
Kim Wigan, Budget Committee member.
Brian Hodson, Vice Chair of Urban Renewal and URA Budget Committee member.
Right, I know, it's kind of confusing now. We have too many hands. Oh, yeah, I'm URA too.
Herman Maldonado, City Council.
Dan Stearns, City Council.
Jack Pendleton, committee member. Lee Wigan, Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee person.
Jim Davis, City Council.
David Tate, budget member.
Katie Joyner, financial analyst.
I can remember. Scott Stein, financial director.
Eileen Stein, Urban Renewal Agency Administrator.
Scott Sassy, City Council.
Daryl Paulson, committee member.
Okay, next step.
Teresa Ridgely, deputy city recorder. Maya Benham, administrative director and city recorder. Jamie Stickle, director of economic development.
Jerry King, public works director.
That's all that's in here, Scott.
Okay, is there any public comment on the FY 24-25 Canby Urban Renewal Agency proposed budget?
No one here.
Okay, on to old business. Approved minutes from the May 25, 2023 Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
New business, elect URA Budget Committee Chair.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we elect by acclamation the committee chair and vice chair from the City Budget Committee to do leadership on the URA Budget Committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Received budget message.
I was going to abstain.
There we go. So, Madam Chair, your chair again.
All right.
Receive budget message.
Hold on. Okay.
All right, budget message.
So just walking through the budget message really quickly. Oh, there we go. What happened? Okay. Just to comment on the basics of urban renewal, just to remind everybody and those of you that are new, just to fill you in a little bit. So Canby's Urban Renewal District was created in 1999. The Urban Renewal Agency is a separate entity from the city, so therefore there's a separate budget committee as you have been composed. The council acts as the Urban Renewal Agency Governing Board. The tax base, once the Urban Renewal Agency is created, is frozen, and all proceeds above the frozen base go to the Urban Renewal Agency for debt service. The agency issues debt that pays for the projects of the Urban Renewal Agency. And just to let you know that the Urban Renewal District or Agency incremental value of assessed value has grown from zero when the base was frozen to $302 million. So that's how much of assessed value that the Urban Renewal Agency has added in the community. So the things that drive an urban renewal budget, of course, is how much property tax collections are received, how much debt service is issued. Every urban renewal agency is created with a maximum indebtedness value. Canby's is about 51 million. And then the capital projects that are done are also a function of how the budget comes together. So, so this year, the budget includes for materials and services, this is $425,000 of that is for staffing, for the economic development staff or fund out of the Urban Renewal Agency. And then $10,000 for a small materials and services to use for their operations. But as I indicated, most of the projects are capital projects. So this year, we have $25,000 in budget in beautification and marketing, $75,000 in facade improvement program, $562,000 is allocated towards the Highway 99 logging bridge, and $585,000 is designated toward the downtown alleyways project. So, oh man, you can't see that. Can you see it there? I wanted to show what not just what is budgeted, but what is projected this next year to budget, and show you how much money you have to work with for the rest of the life of the Urban Renewal Agency. So my apologies that you can't see these very well.
Do we have a copy of that?
No. Yeah, yeah, if you would, please.
At the risk of being crass, can we just stand up and walk over there and look at it while you're talking about it?
You could, yeah, absolutely, if you want to. So as presented, the Urban Renewal Agency has 425, this is just, it has, revenues, property tax increment budgeted on the revenue side, interest, prior year property taxes that are budgeted on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, $425,000, as I said, and $10,000 for materials and services. $425,000 is due to the city for the economic development staff. $25,000 in beautification, $75,000 for the facade improvement, facade grant program, $562,000 for the logging bridge, and $585,000 for the downtown alleyway improvement projects. All we plan to spend next fiscal year, all that is left on the work plan, if you will, of the Urban Renewal Agency for next fiscal year is the redevelopment of First Street and Second Avenue. And so that amount, it's probably going to be more, but the last estimate that we had was $320,000 for First Street improvements, and Second Avenue redevelopment was $400,000. So adding all of that together, it does leave about $962,000, which is, can you enlarge that by any chance?
I'm printing 25 copies, so everybody can have.
Okay.
Oh, nice. Wow,
Okay.
thank you.
That leaves $962,000 that is unappropriated, available for projects or whatever. So there are certain assumptions that are made in this budget too that I wanted to cover. One is that this current year.
No Scott for that one. Sorry, Eileen. I was letting them know to email Scott Sassy a copy of that as well.
Oh,
Oh,
and
okay.
Darryl,
Yes.
since they're not in the room to get the paper one. Although on Zoom, they might be able to see it better than we can.
He may be.
Yeah, you can see it better on Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it better.
Okay. My apologies.
Thank you.
don't send it.
No, he said he could see it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So there's 3 projects that I want to talk about, well, 4 projects that I want to talk about. One is, in this current fiscal year, we have $378,000 that is the overage on the community park that has been much discussed by the city council. On the logging bridge, the last time we had a discussion about this, so there's $562,000 budgeted for that line item. The last time that Jerry gave the city council or the Urban Renewal Agency Board a briefing on that, he thought that that was going to cost $172,000 just to repair the rust marks on the bridge. So that was all that we've set aside for that project so far. Of the $585,000, he thinks that the project for alleyway repair for all 12 alleys is going to cost $372,000. So, and then in fiscal year 24-25, what we're planning to budget for is the $320,000 and the $400,000 for the redevelopment of and between First and Second and that area of downtown. So as you can see now, clearer, that we have $962,345 that is unallocated, if you will. That assumes that we continue to pay for economic development staff and those expenses through the remainder of the Urban Renewal Agency. I know there was some discussion over the year about phasing that cost out, and we decided not to phase that cost out because the revenue associated that supports that program is still in the Urban Renewal Agency, so why would we phase it out and not bring over the revenue at the same time? So our current thinking is that as that revenue comes in, that's when the full cost should be attributed to the city general fund and not beforehand. I think that's it.
Oh, yes, sorry. Counselor Davis.
Okay, are we ready for questions?
Yeah, I think I've set the stage well enough.
Okay.
So,
So my recollection on the 425,000 was we instructed, not discussed, that we reduce that amount this year, and then the following year that it would all automatically be down to zero, so that the city isn't receiving such a shock of $425,000 in the general fund budget. I understand what you're saying in regards to revenue coming in would offset that 425 once the Urban Renewal Agency closes. As long as you're prepared for that $425,000 plus, probably be closer to 475 or 500 when it closes in 26, at the end of 25-26.
well, we will be prepared to for that shock, if you will, because the city will be receiving its own additional property taxes as a result of the closure of the Urban Renewal Agency. So the city will be receiving additional revenue. So that's the idea.
Okay, all right. I understand the idea. I don't agree with it, but I understand the idea. In regards to community park, I'll refer back to the last discussion with Scott Archer, and he said that any overage on community park would come out of the general fund or be reimbursed by the city back to the Urban Renewal District for the overage. and not come out of the urban renewal district.
And I think I've heard other viewpoints expressed as well over time, so that's
Well, you can
why.
watch the minutes of the meeting and see what that discussion was.
Oh, Counselor Patton?
Actually, I believe
Lee, did you have a question?
Lee was, I guess, I'm not sure if Jim is finished.
Oh, no, I'm not. So just general discussion, I believe that the letter was sent from Sean Barwick to the mayor asking for reimbursement, correct? And that the city hasn't reimbursed the urban renewal district, the way I recall it. And then we made it real clear at our urban renewal meeting that the sidewalks on First Street were a priority. And with the downtown traffic, with all the activities happening downtown, that's a safety issue. So I'd like to see the sidewalks move to this next year budget in the urban renewal for the safety items. And in regards to the bridge, $500,000 is not gonna, the $507,000 is not gonna paint that bridge. It's not gonna do the job. And so I really believe we should do that under a grant or of some sort of grant program so that we do the bridge right. You know, whether it's a walkway down or whatever, that we get a budget for that and that we do it right. And I don't think we should be patch painting the bridge. I think that's just gonna make it look worse, you know, than what it currently is by putting, patching the bridge. I think we should stop the bridge project altogether. And then we need to finish the alleyways, and that's $300 and some thousand to do the alleyways as we had directed, as well as the sidewalks. So that should be a priority in this next year budget without doing anything to the bridge. And then we did talk about the $75,000 in regards to the beautification or to the facade improvements. And I look on here where we had $350,000 in the 23 budget, and now we're going, I'm sorry, on the facade improvements, we had $37,000. Now we're going back up to $75,000. Well, we haven't made a determination on the definition of light. In other words, why are we doing these facade improvements when we don't have a firm definition of what blight means? To me, that means something's fallen down on the building, something's looking real bad, and not just, you know, allocating money to a business to paint their building or to do windows and things like that. So we needed what that definition means, what blight means, because we don't have that. In regards to, so I'd like to see the facade improvement program lowered down to $25,000 from $75,000. And just so the rest of the committee knows that if we didn't spend the money, if we don't spend the money, that money goes back to the assessor's office. And the assessor divides that into the junior taxing districts and disperses that money, including the city. So the city actually receives that money back as well. So the city would see that money back, as well as the school district receives the money back, the fire district, the mosquito districts, all the junior taxing districts that are currently losing money will see that money coming back in. And everybody knows the state of school districts today in regards to funding for school districts. So that's why I think that we should do our best to try to not spend the money and end this urban renewal district as soon as possible.
I would agree with all of those statements.
Counselor
I
Pat?
would as well.
So I guess for me, the thing, when it comes to the bridge and all of these projects, if memory serves me correctly, at the last urban renewal district meeting, we had said, go ahead and come up with a list of items, so overage of Maple Street Park, or overage of Maple, or Community Park, the bridge, different options for the bridge, come up with what the totals are for these various projects. And then we as a council, or we as a commission, will decide which of those projects we're gonna fund this year and next. And then, once that's decided, we're actually gonna do it. And we're not gonna dink us around with this any longer. So I guess my first question is, are these essentially like placeholder numbers for now until the commission has that more in-depth conversation of what
Next week.
what ones, yeah, if it's next week or whatever, what ones we're going to pick off of that list?
These are the projects. So, so all that the Urban Renewal Agency Board has decided that it wanted to do was the alleyways and the redevelopment of First Street and First and Second Avenue. So those were the projects. And then I was trying earlier to amass an amount of money to be able to do the logging bridge, but we're just not going to be able to get there. So, the issues are what is going to happen with the community park overage. The alleyways, it looks like it's going to be 372,000 rather than 585. So you have some savings there that goes back into fund balance. If you wanted to do the repair on the logging bridge, that was that 172,000. And then the redevelopment of Fur and First and Second is on there as well. So this is it.
So
This
then
is it.
then essentially, instead of the commission deciding from that list at the commission meeting, we as a budget committee are deciding those?
No, you're not. So, what is in the as presented column, what is in the budget right now is $5.9 million in revenue. 1.62 million dollars between operations and capital projects, and then 12,358 for debt service to pay off the Series A and B bonds. So that's what's in the budget for this year. So that's what the budget committee would be acting on.
So we're not going to have that discussion then?
Well, this is the budget committee. That discussion would be had by the Urban Renewal Agency Board.
Correct. So I guess.
Assuming that you leave in place the budgeted amounts. Assuming that the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee leaves in place these amounts in the budget.
So if I'm looping into this correctly, then this is this amount of money of the list of projects that the commission, the Urban Renewal Agency, will choose from. This is the maximum amount that could be used.
So this is a cash flow projection.
Yeah.
But all that the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee tonight should focus on is the FY25 as presented column.
Okay. I guess it's still not, I guess to me, the thing is we haven't, as the Urban Renewal, and correct me if I'm wrong, as the Urban Renewal District, or Urban Renewal Agency, we haven't really decided, didn't think we had decided on all of those projects yet. I thought that was the directive to come back to the agency on, or did I black that meeting out as well?
My recommendation, there were decisions made last fall around just doing the alleyway project and doing the redevelopment.
The sidewalks?
I don't recall that discussion about the sidewalks. I mean, it could be added in, but I don't recall that discussion. Or the,
I guess, so I guess I don't know, I guess I'm out of touch with what's going on, but I will say, the other thing that I will say is that so based on these numbers, if we do all of the things that we are recommending to do at these amounts, we will not be using $962,000 of the potential that could be used for projects.
you're correct. That is correct.
So for me,
But that's not money we have currently, that's money that's still to come into the district in the future year, right? That's why it's under 26?
Right.
Is that right? Okay.
yeah, so for me, if being a person who would like to see us utilize this district to its fullest potential, what I will say is I would be willing to not die on the sword of spending every last dime of that if we cover the Maple Street or Community Park overage out of this rather than trying to take it out of the city. That's a conversation for the Urban Renewal Agency, but that's the way I'm leaning on that one.
Counselor Hensley, do you have?
I do. Okay, so as presented, we have $562,000 for the logging bridge, which we've already determined is impossible. We've got $585 allocated to the alleyways, which we've since determined will be less than that. And doing some quick math, that leaves us $775,000 that's presented in the 25 budget that we're not going to use as allocated. So I'm wondering why we can't move the First Street and Second Avenue redevelopment sidewalks over to this year. That's $720,000, so we still have $55,000 unallocated after that.
I'll let Jerry answer that, but I think it's a function of workload more than anything.
It's not a money load?
I mean,
Yeah.
if, my take on this, unless there's some real financing that's different, I like what you said as a placeholder. That's a placeholder. These are projects, we kind of been all over the place, we haven't had meetings. If this money's approved, I think that we could switch it to what projects you want. Am I wrong there? Like, I mean, could we do?
Well, can you do them? Or are you literally just, we're putting money in this fiscal year, but we're going to have to reappropriate it next year because you couldn't get to the project?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is why we were gonna have this discussion at the urban renewal meeting next week. We're going to get, as Commissioner Patton put it, a menu of options. So I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse, but I know we're under statutory reasoning
Exactly.
here, so we have to do this.
Right.
But if this committee could approve the numbers, then we can move the money to different projects.
Could
It's
I
just,
answer
we're
the-
going to have the budget committee approve this many dollars for projects, period.
Could I answer the workload question real quick?
Sure.
So, just to answer the workload question that Eileen's talking about, if you remove the bridge and traded it with downtown sidewalks and stuff, that's way easier for me.
Well, didn't we already?
The bridge is a huge, I'm just saying, the bridge is in this year's budget, coming budget. And if we're not doing that, and you guys wanted to move it up, and we had enough money, that's trading off, if that's acceptable to do, that's easier work than redoing the bridge.
Well, and we could flip-flop it and where we bring these projects that are in the 26 column into this year, as I stated a few minutes ago, and move the logging bridge out to 26, where then we have time, like Commissioner Davis suggested, we look for grant money.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, right, to change, I mean, I do it with streets projects all the time, it's just capital.
So I would probably recommend that you take the,
I'm sorry.
if you take the 562 and the 585 as a dollar amount in whole and move it up into just the URD projects line item,
Yeah.
then you can go through the process of approving budget at that dollar amount, and then you can have your discussion at the next meeting of the urban renewal district for what projects you'd like to do, and you're working within that budget constraint.
I propose we make that so number one. That sounds very easy. Does that make sense to you two?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we come in on budget with the alleys, Counselor Hensley, that leaves us with 775,000.
Yeah, I did that now.
Did you already tell me that? Sorry. Okay, sorry. I'll stop.
Yes, Ms. Chapin.
Can't we just get those guys who are doing the street right now to do the alleys? I mean, they're already there, you know, can't we?
It doesn't work that way.
They save money though, right?
They are.
Just roll some tar down there.
Not K&E, but the people that are doing our street maintenance,
That's- oh, yeah.
they're doing the alleys.
Yeah, not the.
Oh, they are doing the
We
alleys.
combined it to save money.
Okay,
And we
good.
got a really good deal on it.
No, that's
Yeah.
really good because they did the Safeway parking lot,
The
right?
street people will do it. Not
That's
street people,
good.
that sounds weird. Not the ODOT.
I mean, it's already screwed up, so let's just screw it all
Keep
the way
going.
up.
Screw it all the way up.
I'm just,
Okay, yes, sorry,
Thank you.
Mayor.
Scott and Eileen, what are the taxing districts that have been quote unquote deferred from urban, with the creation of the urban rule? I know we've got schools, I know we've got mosquitoes,
Fire.
Canby Fire,
City general fund.
city,
County.
and that was my question, was the county, is that just general, goes into the general fund of the county? Or does it go specifically somewhere for the county?
The money that would come back from the urban renewal district had,
So when we,
it goes back to the county in their, let's say it's in their pool of the Canby area that is basically allocated out normally.
So it does come back to Canby agencies.
It does not go to like Oregon City, it doesn't go, it comes back to here.
So it acts as the county portion, so I'm trying to like wrap my mind around Commissioner Davis's comment. So in regards to the county, the money that goes to the county will get, they act as a pass-through and gets spent within Canby. They don't peanut butter it across the whole county.
The vector control
I
agency is the
know
only
that,
one.
I know that the
Yeah.
vector does that. I'm specifically asking about the county.
Let me.
Because here's my counterpoint, Commissioner Davis, is that when we look at the urban renewal district, so schools, vector, I will no longer call it mosquitoes, vector, the county, Canby Fire, and the city.
Yes.
So of those, that's where I'm trying to, the vector is gonna get peanut buttered across the whole county. Funds for the urban renewal district are gonna go down to the state, and they're not gonna come specifically to Canby School District. They're going to the state, which then is used statewide. So that's what I'm trying to understand, the county money. So amongst those, the schools, the vector control, and possibly the county, that's money that I would rather see us leverage for projects here within Canby before we close it than not leverage that and just, because we're not gonna get the full, what was it, $900,000? Whatever it is we don't spend, we'll round up to $1 million. Canby Fire and the city will not see that full $1 million. And so I don't think I think that we're not leveraging it as well as we could if we were to look at these projects, whether that's roads or it's putting a big, and maybe we don't get the whole bridge done, but we at least get it painted. It is the biggest eyesore in our community. It is the entrance from the east side into our city, and it is abysmal, and it has been for 25 freaking years. And so I'm having a real hard time that we're not gonna do anything that's, because that to me is a blight item in our city, is the logging bridge. So that's where I'm at, and so I'm trying to understand, is the county again, if it's gonna come back into Canby for projects or whatever, I'd be curious what that is, and we can discuss that later, that's irrelevant right now. But again, if it's gonna be peanut buttered across the county, that's even less than that we're going to see if we don't spend the money now. And when we close the district, we're gonna close it, it's gonna go away, and all those districts will get what they get. And it'll be a flush of money for at least a little while. So I just want to make sure that I understand and that the community members of this group understand that aspect of it as well.
I mean, you can give me a power painter and an artist, and I'll go paint the bridge.
Councilor Patton, you have.
Yes.
So,
Graffiti.
Just swing me back and forth, we're good.
so I guess in order to keep things moving a bit, it sounds like we need to have a compromise as far as in this budget regarding the numbers, because we've got to move forward with this. So it sounds like that compromise is to take the 562,000 and the 585,000 out of specific Highway 99E logging bridge and downtown alleys and move that up into the URD projects generally. But then, rather than us as commissioners duke that out here tonight, we will draw our battle lines and duke that out at a future urban renewal district meeting as far as what projects that money should be spent on.
You're talking about the 1,147,000 there?
Well, I'm talking about whatever this
62 and 585.
how we end up slicing that pie during that meeting will be at that meeting. But at least this way, if we pick some projects off of that bucket list, we'll have money budgeted this year to get those done, whether they're the bridge, the sidewalks, streets, whatever. We'll at least have that, that money there.
Yeah, I'd be good with that, with the exception of, I'd like to see the facade improvement program lowered down to 40,000, since we spent 37,000 last year, so that we're not upping that up to 75,000. And then 25,000 for beautification and marketing, whatever that is.
Okay, yeah. Councilor Hensley.
Thank you. Yeah. That basically, Madam Chair, I was going to suggest, part of what Commissioner Patton said is to move the 1.147 million up to URD projects. And I agree with Commissioner Davis, but you did change your mind. You said 25 initially, and now you're saying you're okay with 40 on the facade
Well,
improvement?
just going on what was spent last year at 37.
Okay. So I'm okay with that. But what we haven't decided is the 378 for the community park overage. So I would like to figure out what we're gonna do about that.
And Mr. Tate, you.
I wanted to address something slightly different. So if you want to finish that thought and come back to me, that would be okay.
Okay.
That community park thing, we agreed, that I remember, we agreed at the last URD meeting that was gonna be one of those items to discuss as far as that menu items. We were gonna discuss what all those numbers would look like if we funded community park out of that amount or ended up requesting it from the city.
So you're proposing we leave it as a community park placeholder or move it up to URD projects with the other two?
Well, I mean, technically it's.
You can't move it up with the other two because it's an expenditure.
It's already expended.
It's already expended.
Yes. So if.
So it'd be a supplemental budget thing if we decided to not fund it.
Which is what the next week's urban renewal agency, basically, you're going to discuss is a supplemental budget, one way or another. It will be one resolution if you decide to keep the expenditure in the urban renewal agency. It will be a different resolution showing an amount of money coming out of the city general fund into the urban renewal agency. Did I get that right, Scott?
Okay. So that decision to be made, and we've got to pick projects, vote on it, and be done. Because I don't know about, I'm pretty sure the rest of my colleagues are with me. We're tired of talking about these projects, we just want to see them get done. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tate.
Okay, so in the spirit of community involvement, that meeting, if it's a supplemental budget meeting, ought to be a budget meeting and not just the Urban Renewal Agency meeting. At least that would be my suggestion. If it's going to be registered toward a supplemental budget, that it be a meeting of the Budget Committee and not just the Urban Renewal Agency.
I don't know, it's never been that way.
It's never been done that way.
Yeah, the authorities rest with the Urban Renewal Agency.
Same with city budget supplementals.
Okay, Mayor Hudson, you
So, just, I think I got the answer to this question, but sorry, my brain is being a little foggy. So if we approve this, what it looks like about $1.9 million difference between income and the debt service, we can change, we can go ahead and we're going to plan on changing it all next week anyway. I mean, some of these budget items. Is that what
Not the
we're
debt service, just the project.
talking- not the debt service. No, the debt service is
That's
pretty much off the table. But the other stuff, we're gonna go redo it next week anyway, maybe.
Well, kind of.
Well, there's going to be essentially there's going to be two different conversations, right? There's going to be the supplemental budget to say, we've spent more than what we had allocated in fiscal year 2023, 2024. What do you want to do with that? Do you want to take that do you want to keep that in urban renewal? Or do you want to demand the city pay that money back? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
That's
Then
regardless
the
of your
next conversation is, we need to look at future projects. The potential future projects are bridge, sidewalks, street, blah, 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 blah. This is how much it's gonna cost. This is how much we can borrow or use. So do you want to fund all these projects? Do you want to fund some of these projects? So there are two different conversations. The supplemental budget was part of last year's budget allocation like this. The future project list will impact this year, 2024, 2025, and then 2025, 2026. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
Okay. As far as whether I don't know, I don't believe there's a mechanism for the,
So the due to the city amount, was that included in income for the budget we just approved of?
Due to the city. Oh, the 378, I know. What is?
Line 2 under expenditures.
Yes,
Oh, on this page, okay,
Okay.
yeah.
that is,
That's the.
that is revenue
employees.
that the city is anticipating to receive.
Okay.
and to Mr. Tate's question about whether that it requires or needs to be a budget thing, I think that is something that needs to be clarified from Mr. Doofman if we want a definite answer on how that all works.
Because, so a couple of things. One, I think because it's pertaining to last year's budget, and the only time there's a percentage trigger for the budget committee to reconvene, and I don't think we hit that trigger, which would require all of us to get together, to your point, committee member Tate, on that aspect. So that's why, so I don't think we hit that percentage to trigger that, is my understanding. So
Right.
I'm looking at Scott's view.
I don't actually think there is a budget law requirement for the budget committee to reconvene.
Is he allowed to come if he wants to, or?
They can come, but my understanding in budget law, there is no actual requirement after these meetings for it to pass the budget. Once they're done. They can, but as my understanding, there isn't one. And I think getting David's lawyer opinion would probably be good, and you don't have to rely on mine. prior audit knowledge.
And then Jamie, since you're here and you've been the last staff member to hang on, other than Jerry, department head, pardon me. So can you address for me and this group, one, the blight comments and definitions, as well as the facade program, because that is a piece that we've had. Are there that many more buildings, so to speak, that are interested or we are marketing to use this program? And has it been successful and has it done what we wanted it to do?
A lot of questions.
Well, that last piece is a tricky question, so I'll end on that one. Usually they don't have any problem hearing my voice.
That's what I was.
I was looking in our urban renewal agency plan to see if the word blight is actually spelled out specifically. I believe that it is. I was looking, but it's a long plan. So I would be happy to provide that answer we could send it in an email to the budget committee and also at next week's meeting.
That's great.
The facade improvement program, we do receive interest still quite a bit. And the one thing about that is I was glad to hear that you're hoping to, even if it's reducing the amount of, we've kept kind of that $75,000 going. When I started, I think it was $150,000, but the interest just wasn't quite there. But since it is a rolling grant, a property owner, so that's one of the key pieces, is that the grant is really targeted to property owners, not business owners, so that they can make the investment that will be long lasting in their buildings that helps support the overall effort of Canby. But since it's a rolling grant, then you have 2 years at this point. It will have to then reduce because we are getting to the end of the urban renewal district. But 2 years to be able to utilize that funding. I think we have one outstanding right now, but we have had interest, I would say, in the spring of 2 to 3 other property owners. And I think that without sharing which properties they are, I would say that investment, even if it is a little bit of paint, can go a long way, and it can spur other investment. As far as the question of if it's reaching the goal, I think that that depends on the person, the opinion. If you're asking me, I think that the dollars that we have invested into this community through the facade improvement grant have definitely benefited the community as a whole, helped to further make Canby an attractive place to do business and to want to do business, whether that's opening a business or actually spending your hard-earned dollars. And so I do think that investment is there, although it is hard to track and it is hard to tell, because what I might think is blighted and needs investment, Jerry might not see it the same way, or vice versa. He would if I told him to.
So I got to talk to my landlord to see if he wants to get this grant.
But I do think that the urban renewal district as a whole has made very good investments, whether that is on public infrastructure, working on community agencies, and then even on property owners. And then just because it was mentioned, and just to make sure that while I have the floor, the beautification and marketing item that was mentioned previously. So that, I'm not sure why it predates me as to why it's called beautification and marketing, because most of urban renewal is on tangible things. At the marketing aspect, I think, is based on for example, the Welcome to Canby signs that we have, at each end of town, and the monument signs that we have at Ivy, Elm, Grant Street intersections, that kind of work. It's
beautification because it helps people to know I've arrived in Canby, here I am. And it is also marketing in the sense Canby the garden spot, which, you know, whether you agree with the tagline or disagree with the tagline, you know, it helps to really set the stage. And we were hoping to use that line item this coming year. This past year, we used it to do new downtown banners, especially since we're getting to the end of the district, to make sure that we're, you know, putting that investment in something that will be longstanding. We were hoping to do the banners on Highway 99. The reason that that takes a bit more of an investment than downtown is because it's ODOT right of way, so you have to have a company that can get the permit to be able to do so. We've had a company out of Portland in the past, and we got our banners through Canby Signs and Graphics. So just to shed a little light on that one piece, because I think it's beautification and marketing doesn't really fully give the full picture of how the money's been used in the past, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Question?
Counselor Hensley.
Thank you. You actually answered one of my questions, because I was wondering why it was labeled marketing. I thought we were marketing a program that was going away. So it was marketing the town. So that answers that question. And the other piece was actually to try and maybe help Mr. Tate feel a little more comfortable in the fact that when we move the 1.147 million into URD projects, you're still approving the same dollar amount and just not how we're going to spend on what projects. And that's what we're going to decide hopefully next week. But the dollar amounts won't change.
That is true, but next week on Wednesday, if it's a meeting of the agency, I show up, I get 2 minutes to sit in the front, and that's the last of my input. If it's a budget meeting.
You get 3.
Then I get 3, excuse me, thank you. If it's a budget meeting, then the community members get full participation with the rest of the city council, which we would have had tonight, except for the work wasn't done in advance. So I think from a perception standpoint, it makes sense to do it that way.
Just to counter that a little bit for clarification, the budget committee tonight, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, but the budget committee tonight is agreeing on the as presented 2025 column. The budget committee of yesteryear was the one that worked on the 2024. So that budget committee and this is where legal will come in, wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it doesn't even exist anymore because most of those people aren't even here. So that money has already been allocated to last year's budget, and now it's up to the Urban Renewal Agency to figure out how they're gonna work that out.
Correct. I don't care about last year. I care about this year. The budget we would have approved tonight is not going to get approved because the work wasn't done ahead of time. So I think that the community has the right to have it as a budget meeting where all of us that were asked to serve can have full input. That's my.
Okay.
Do you have an opinion
I
on
was
how
gonna say, do you
the
have
money
opinions
should
on
be?
projects? Share your opinions on the projects now. You have the floor.
I mean, this group can the citizen members of this group can say, hey, we think you should prioritize, you know, of things that need to be done in the community. They can send up through this group what they would like to see. Whether the agency will actually act upon it or not is a different story, but it is within the purview of this group to make those recommendations.
Absolutely.
So if you wanted to say tonight, I think, you know, as a committee member, you should prioritize the bridge and sidewalks, then.
Why are you influencing it?
Or
Let him pick one.
or whatever, any number of projects, you know, paint City Hall purple, whatever. You have, it is within your purview to do that.
What color doors would it have to be?
The whole building's purple, I don't know.
I would agree with Councilor Davis and the $40,000 in the facade. I would like to see the First Street improvements prioritized if the workload can handle it. And if to get the workload to handle it makes sense, then pump the Logan Bridge. And keep the alleyways as recommended by staff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick
question
Yes.
for Jamie.
Councilor Davis.
Jamie, when you receive a facade application, you bring it to the Urban Renewal Agency for approval?
Yes. Yes, so when we receive a facade application, provided that it's, completed, we've got pictures, et cetera, we send an email to, it's called the design committee that, says, usually the comments are along the lines of, this looks like a great project, or, would the applicant consider, a third color on the paint scheme or something, and we bring the application, the staff report, the application with those comments, photos, and we ask the applicant to come to the Urban Renewal Agency so that should the Urban Renewal Agency have any questions, instead of having, a situation where you have staff saying, well, I'm not certain what that looks like, or I'm not certain, what their intention was on this, that they can answer it and they can kind of paint the picture and answer any questions.
Okay, so then who filters if it meets the definition of Blythe?
We bring the application forward to Urban Renewal, the staff does, but so it would be, I guess, up to the Urban Renewal Agency to determine if they wanted to spend funds for that project.
Okay, so the Urban Renewal Agency would make that determination. Good.
Staff, sorry, just to make sure that I'm being clear, staff really checks to make sure it's, located within the urban renewal district, that the project or the scope of the project fits what the program as written, those kinds of things. So we're just making sure it's complete and walking through the process, also working with our planning department to make sure that somebody isn't proposing something for a building that then would be against the code. So we're checking for completeness, and then it would be up to the discretion of the Urban Renewal Agency.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is there any citizen comments or discussion on any of the projects?
To be fair, Mr. Dave had ideas, so yeah, she has a good question. Does any other citizen member have a input on the project list before we close that discussion?
Before you close that discussion, I just wanted to report that you cannot move the redevelopment projects into this current fiscal year without it impacting, without the project going into deficit. So part of the reason that those projects are in fiscal year 26 is because we need the next increment of tax revenue in order to be able to pay for those projects as well. So my apologies, it's not just a staff capacity issue, but it's a cash flow issue.
But we have the 562,000 allocated to the bridge?
Yeah.
Well, I
Why
think,
we can't move that project over into to the cash spot that bridge has?
I think what's being said is like, we can't do the sidewalks, the road, the bridge, and the alleys all in 1 year.
No.
Because it'll be too much money.
Right.
But
We know that.
if we put this amount of money into the line and say, we're gonna, instead of doing the bridge this year, we're gonna do the bridge next year, and we're gonna swap it out for the sidewalks, as long as the sidewalks don't cost more than the bridge, then we're okay. Is that
Right.
a safe interpretation?
Yeah, so the $720,000 that is in fiscal year 26, if you include that as part of the 1.147 million, then you're okay. Then you're okay.
Right, that's what I was proposing, because the fact that the bridge money would come out and move to the future year. And then we could talk, like Commissioner Davis said, talk about grant help and whatnot.
I think we were just looking for clarification, because if you're looking at the 1.147 as other projects out, and then you wanted to move the First Street and the Second Avenue redevelopment into this year, then we're in deficit spending, and so we'd have to read.
No, we were talking about swapping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any
So
other
was there a motion to amend that facade improvement thing down to a lower number?
It wasn't an official, it was a
So
recommendation.
what is it then? I didn't write it
I
down.
think the recommendation was from 75 to 40, correct?
Yes.
40, okay.
And do we need to make a motion to move the items from Highway Lot 99 and alleyways up, or can you just move that?
Just move that.
Okay. Because we're not reducing the number. Okay, so yeah, we need a motion on reduction.
I'll make that motion.
Good. I'll second.
So what's the motion?
To lower the 75 down to 40,000.
For the facade improvements.
I'll second that.
Did you get that, Teresa?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any discussion?
We're almost there.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
What? Because I think it's true.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Hodgson's a nay. Okay.
Motion approved.
Yes, approved.
So, was there a motion made to combine the bridge money and the alleyway money and move that into urban renewal district projects, or that's just going to happen?
Scott said he could just do it because it's not a number change. It's a position on the page change.
Okay.
So then the extra 35,000 would be included in that as well?
So currently, the way that I show the budget, as of what that would be approved, is the beautification and marketing was at 25,000. Facade improvement program went to 40.
Right.
The URD projects as a whole would be 1.147 million.
Okay.
So if you were to take the difference of the 35,000, we either can drop that into the URD projects, or I leave that as an operating contingency amount.
I would leave it as an operating contingency amount.
They can use it if they need it.
Do we need a motion on the contingency piece, or a consensus enough for you?
Consensus is enough there because I've already got it calculated together.
So is there a consensus to move that to what?
I think, leave it as a contingency for 35,000.
Yeah.
So there,
Looks like
head
that's
nods
fine.
of 35,000 of contingency?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Maybe. I mean,
Okay.
We're almost there.
She knows that as well.
It's like saying it's a quiet night in an emergency room.
So I could find the answer for Eileen, because she has to give us the number to fill in that.
That's what I'm, that's what I'm.
That's what they're working on.
We're almost there, almost.
starting to fade. 10 o'clock, I turn into pumpkin.
7:09. 636. Okay. So the motion would be to move that the Budget Committee of the Canby Urban Renewal Agency approve the budget for the 2004-2005 fiscal year in the amount of $7,709,636, and to levy property taxes for the 2024-2025 fiscal year for the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under Section 1C, Article 11 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457.
So moved.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
The second was Maldonado, I don't know if you heard that. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't say that very loud.
All right, any
It's
discussion?
getting late, man. I'm fading out.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Any abstentions? Did everybody vote?
Thank you.
All right, vote we adjourn.
Madam Chair says we adjourn.
All right.
It's a non-debatable motion. Thank you all the citizen members. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, and my colleagues, but we're expected to be here. We just appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah.
Okay.